Thomas in the middle. Shoot! Score! Jake Neighbours finds the back of the net on a great feed from Robert Thomas. Kevin Hayes off the near wing to the corner. Backhands to Toropchenko. He scores! Alexei Toropchenko went to the front of the net. Hayes found him. 3-1 Blues. Pettersson falls down in front of the net. Blues get it to Shen. He scores! The St. Louis Blues win. Bring out the Zamboni. The captain buries the game winner for the Blues. 4-3 the final tonight in Vancouver.
That's what it sounded like right here on your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN last night, as you heard it. Chris Kerber on the call. 4-3 winner in Vancouver as the Blues come away with a win in overtime. Alex, once again, I didn't feel like they played all that well for the vast majority of the game. But we're not starting negative today because that is not the vibe. As you heard there on that call coming out of that win, they're finding ways to win, man. For the first time in 2 years, this team is 4 games above 500. They're now 5 games above 500 under Drew Bannister. If you go by points percentage, Alex, not the actual points, but points percentage based on the number of games in which you've played, the Blues are tied for the final wild card spot in the Western Conference. Wow! I can't believe that I'm saying this. I can't believe this is where we've arrived. The Blues fired their coach midseason.
Okay,
They looked completely dead in the water. But hey, man, we've seen this story before. They fired their coach midseason.
Oh, cup or
went
bust.
to the Stanley Cup.
You saying what I think you're saying?
They did it based on a bunch of great goaltending and some depth of scoring, and I'll be damned. And they're getting depth of scoring again.
And they went on an 11-game win streak in January.
I mean, they are 3 games in.
3.
They could get to 6. Unfortunately, they can't get to the 11. I will say this, though, Alex, man. We talked so much about this stretch of games, starting with Dallas on December 27th, coming out of that Christmas break. And since then, they beat Dallas. They played really well, but came away with a loss against Colorado and Pittsburgh. Then they beat Vancouver. They beat Carolina. They find a way to win in a big one against New York at home. They lose in overtime, get a point, though, against the Boston bleeping Bruins, the best team in the East. You beat Washington. You beat Calgary in a game that you didn't deserve to win, but you found a way to do it anyways, and the points matter. At the end of the season, it doesn't say if you deserved or not to win it. They got it. And then you go on the road at Vancouver, the best team in the West, and you win that one. I don't really know what to make of this team anymore, man. I don't know what to do with them because all of the things that I've been criticizing them for, I still think they're there, but it doesn't matter right now.
Right now, I think we all just need to be Johnny Tsunami and ride that wave. I think we all just need to ride. Yeah, you guys don't remember Johnny Tsunami, right?
I do. T-Bone doesn't. No
T-Bone
chance.
has no freaking idea who Johnny Tsunami is. We got to ride that wave, T-Bone and BK. Where the Blues are at now, let's call a spade a spade. Didn't deserve to win that game last night. Corsi rating at even strength in the third period was 75 to 25%.
Damn.
That means the Blues possessed the puck a quarter of that third period.
And it felt that way. It felt worse,
and
actually.
They scored a freaking goal in that third period to retake the lead. Now, I know they gave up the lead. We could talk about that in a different light. But right now, the only thing that matters for the Blues is getting the winning mindset. And these last 3 games, I think, have been impressive. We've talked a lot about how the Blues have reacted after a loss because of Drew Bannister. He's a very blunt individual, which I enjoy. And you went on a 3-game losing streak. It was the most that Drew Bannister went through. And what did he say following that Washington Capitals game? We need to stop deciding when we want to play. We need to start showing up, and we need to start forechecking. What did they do in that last game or the next game against the Washington Capitals? I thought they dominated that one. Then you go to Calgary. You don't play well for one period, and you wake up and you push yourself back into the hockey game. Last night, Calgary was the better team. But you got the better scoring opportunities because you were parked in front of the net. Every single game, I see certain growths from the Blues. Do they look like they're going to win the Stanley Cup? Hell freaking no. But do they look like a team now that can be in a playoff spot and get to the playoffs? They absolutely do, because everybody in the Western Conference has the roller coasters. If you look around, the Blues and the Coyotes are the only 2 teams right now fighting for a playoff spot that actually are playing some winning hockey. Everyone else is losing. That's your opportunity to pounce.
We talked about depth of scoring the other day and how the Blues didn't have it. And now they do. Because Braden Shen, Jake Neighbours, and
BKO.
Brandon Saad over their last 3 games have combined for 7 goals and an assist. 7 goals in their last 3 games after we were critical of, hey, the middle six basically doesn't exist on the Blues. They have a first line, they have a fourth line, they have nothing in between because that's been the way that it's operated for the vast majority of the season. I think your first line's been mostly boo-boo over the last couple of games. And it hasn't mattered because the Neighbours, Shin, and Sod line has stepped up. Now, this is happening at 5-on-5. It's happening on the power play. It's happening at times on the penalty kill. As we saw the other night, Braden Shin comes away with a shorthanded goal. So if you continue getting those kinds of contributions from Neighbours, Shin, Sod, Kevin Hayes with a really nice play last night, Alexei Toropchenko at the front of the net, like, this team can win like this. I don't think they can win a Stanley Cup.
No. They can go on that 5-6 game winning streak they need.
Because they're finding ways to win. And 2 months ago, they were finding ways to lose hockey games, individual games. Now they're finding ways to win because they're staying in these hockey games. Some of that is because of your secondary scoring that you finally got. Some of it is because defensively you can eliminate some of the other team's top lines. And a lot of it is because of your goaltender. But every team's not perfect that gets to the playoff. Frankly, there have been a lot of teams that are perfect that get bounced in the first round. You know, believe me, go watch Columbus beat Tampa in 2019. You get in.
Oh, look last year.
Yeah. You get in and anything can happen. And I'm not sitting here acting like this Blues team can do magic in the postseason. But if we want to talk about exiting out of a retool, and that's what everybody wants in St. Louis, the best way to continue going in that direction is to get into the playoffs. And right now, the Blues are playing at least like playoff hockey.
It doesn't hurt. It can't hurt you to get into the playoffs, get a little extra gate revenue. That certainly helps with the ownership side of things. Maybe
experience.
Experience is the biggest thing, right? Finding out, okay, where do we still have holes that are going to be exposed in the postseason? And it might be they look at it and they say, you know what, our defensive core is not good enough because whoever they go up against, let's say it's the Avalanche in the first round. Dude, they scored 5 goals a game, and it wasn't because our goaltending sucked. It was because we didn't have the right defensive core that was there. Good. Nice lesson to be learned because right now you're building around defensemen that are here for the long haul, based on their contract status at least. So those are good lessons to have early in a retool. And if you're able to win enough games to get to that place, it's a nice thing to have. The other thing it does, it makes Army's decisions at the trade deadline super interesting to me, man. Because if this team is in it, if they are where they are currently, if they just basically play at or around 500 between now and the trade deadline, you certainly aren't trading Buchnevich or Sod or Hayes the way that we've been talking about, maybe doing that full-blown like retool, opening up roster spots at the deadline. You're not doing that. Those guys are still around in the offseason. You could do it then if you really want to. I don't know if you're buying in a significant way, but could you get a third-line winger?
I think you're buying low. I think those under-the-radar players we talked about yesterday, that's who you're going after. You're going to send, and maybe you still send a Marco Scandella out because it opens up playing opportunities.
I wouldn't right now. Because if you're getting, like, if this team is where they are right now, if they are maintaining a playoff spot in early March, and Marco Scandella is playing the way that he has, I'm not trading that guy for a 4th or 5th round pick.
Not for a 4th or 5th round pick, but could you get somebody that could be a third-line winger for you that's an under-the-radar player? A depth player for a playoff team that needs defense?
I think Scandella on a playoff team's a 7th defenseman. Most likely.
Probably.
And so what are teams giving up for that? Not much. Yeah. They're giving you a lottery ticket. And am I better off with that lottery ticket? Or am I better off with a guy who has really cleaned things up defensively for me and has saved my ass when I've needed somebody to go into the line? I think I would rather just have Marco Scandella. But all of this requires you to keep winning.
Right. But on the same side of the token, and play devil's advocate on it, like we just talked about it, playoff experience and getting in, I don't think playoff experience is crucial to a Marco Scandella as it would be to a Scott Perunovich and a Matt Kessel. And those guys would need to be in the lineup.
Maybe. Or maybe I'd say Marco Scandella's better. And so if I have Marco Scandella here, I'm just going to play him. Matt Kessel is not a guy that I'm making decisions around right now.
Really? He's the guy I'm making decisions around right now. I think he's playing better than at least 2 of your defensemen that are in your lineup on a nightly basis.
I think that may be true, but I think that speaks more to those other defensemen than it does about Kessel. I think he's been fine. Yeah. I think he's been the definition of a vanilla.
I knew you were going to be negative at some point
today. I feel like he's been nothing short of He's been a better version of what Tyler Tucker was last year. I think Tyler Tucker, people got way out over
that. I give him more credit than that.
I never understood it. I was like, guys, this guy, he's just big and kind of physical and doesn't do a lot for him. Like, seventh defenseman. He's a fine seventh defenseman. There's nothing wrong with having Tyler Tucker on your roster. If Tyler Tucker's part of your plan in your top four, I'm not sure that we have the same idea of what the vision is for this roster. I feel kind of the same way about Matt Kessel. I can't say that way. I keep wanting to say Matt Castle, the former NFL
Of course, he wants to go right back to the Kansas City Chiefs like always.
I think he's fine. I don't know that if that guy is in your top four 2 years from now, the retool has gone the way that they expected it to. That would be the way that I would view him. And so can he be a part of what you get playoff experience-wise? Sure, maybe he gets a couple of games there. I wouldn't make decisions around him personally. I think I would probably end up keeping Marco Scandella. But this is also me projecting what I think they can get for him, which I don't believe will be much.
And let's also jump back in the time machine and go back to 2016 like we've talked about in the past. Like, even if you're in it, I don't know what Doug Armstrong's going to do, because Doug Armstrong traded Paul Stastny and they were 1 point out and said, yeah, this team's not good enough. Maybe he values playoff experience. Maybe he values that ticket gate revenue. But Doug Armstrong, and I'll say it like I've said it a lot, he is an honest man, and he knows what this team is right now. And for some reason, he can see through those facades that we don't see through, that says, like, this might just be a flash in the pan, and I'm still going to make adjustments to this roster I see fit.
All right, we got this text. I want to get to it real quick. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line from the 980.
Oh, dude, don't. This guy's a troll. This guy's a troll, man.
Oh, Lord, here we go again. For the fourth time this season, it seems every 3 or 4 weeks, BK goes from the Blues being inconsistent and not a playoff team to, we saw 2 or 3 games as a winning streak. And then he starts talking about adding to the team and getting into the playoffs. This Blues team just keeps sucking you guys in and then crapping on you. I guess this is what we are at in this in the rebuild. We are here right now.
We are. B, they're a 500 team, so guess who rides the roller coaster with them? Us 3.
C, welcome to sports.
Yeah.
And D,
what the hell else are we going to talk about?
I don't feel like my thoughts on them are all that different right now than they were 3 weeks ago. The difference is the Western Conference stinks, guys.
Yep.
It's not very good.
Yeah, remember when we were talking about Edmonton on a 14-game win streak, which, by the way, they still are, but we were talking about Seattle being hot, Calgary being hot, Nashville being hot. Guys,
Arizona taking that step. They have not taken that step.
All of those teams are like in a 2, 3, or 4 game losing streak.
Nashville's 5-5 in their last 10. Arizona's 4-5-1 in their last 10. The LA Kings are falling apart. And Drew Doughty last night called out the entire roster, saying there are guys that care more about their points than they do winning.
That sounds
similar. They are 2-5-3 in their last 10 games. We just saw Calgary. That's one of the teams that you're battling with. That team is you a year ago, and they're sell at the deadline. So, yeah, as I look around the teams that you're fighting with, I think what we've realized is, hey, these teams are basically a Spider-Man meme of you. They're all the same. So if you guys are all looking like the same caliber of team, why not us? Why not the St. Louis Blues? That's basically my approach with the team right now. I don't think they're a great hockey team. In fact, I think they're below average. But that might be good enough this year to get into the playoffs, and that's fun. As a fan, your team getting into the postseason is fun.
And the only reason we're here now acting this way is because they're doing something, like BK mentioned, that they haven't done all season, where they're getting the secondary scoring. If last night would have been a game where only Thomas or Kyrie or Buchnevich scored and you still won, I'd be on the air saying the exact same thing. Like, you can't keep doing this. But at least you're getting more contributions elsewhere.
And you know what playoff teams do? They find a way to win. And they should be 0-2 on this road trip. Let's just be honest. They have not played well, yet they are leaving with 4 points after a back-to-back against the Vancouver Canucks and the Calgary Flames.
Like
playoff teams find a way to win.
Just like Johnny Tsunami, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, whoever the hell that
is. Ride that wave. He's Alex ST1 on BK. Coming up in about 15 minutes or so, we'll talk about that wave with Joey Vitale, Blues analyst for 101 ESPN and Bally Sports Midwest. What is he seeing from the Blues game right now? We'll talk to Joe about that coming up at 11:30. But coming up next, it's official. Jim Harbaugh is the next head coach of the LA Chargers. What's the comparison for this? A guy that is a proven winner coming to a team that is a proven loser in recent years.
Whoa.
Can he find a way to have them take on his persona? We'll talk about it next here on 101 ESPN. Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Hey, T-Bone, can we get that breaking news sounder that you do?
Breaking news!
Nailed it.
We got a surprise. The Carolina Panthers have made their hire for their next head coach.
Bill Belichick, Bill Belichick, Bill Belichick, Bill Belichick, Bill Belichick.
Dave Canales, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, that's the correct response. He's their new head coach. He was a first-time coordinator this season down in Tampa Bay. He worked closely with Baker Mayfield. Now, I'll say this on the front end.
Did Carolina just create a head coach?
The created
on
name
NFL
via
Madden?
Yep.
Yeah. Cool.
So, Dave Canales, the most common response to this hire is probably going to be what T-Bone just said. Who? Why? How? What?
Where?
He is a really interesting guy in that he worked closely with Geno Smith in Seattle, and he was apparently one of the main people that got him to play with confidence again. Like, he built him up and allowed him to be a player that we had never seen previously in Geno Smith's career. So there's something there. And then this season, he got a career renaissance out of Baker Mayfield as well. And if you're the Panthers, the number one priority that you have this season, dude, we have got to make this work with Bryce Young. There is no alternative. He has to be a good quarterback for us. And so I can see how you'd convince yourself, let's go offensive mind. Let's get Ben Johnson. And then when Ben Johnson obviously says no to your job, now you have to turn to the next option. And I suppose I could see how Dave Canales is that guy for you because he made it work with Baker Mayfield, smaller in stature, guy that was certainly down on his luck, former top pick.
Yeah, but I don't compare those two.
Made it work with Geno Smith, former, not number one draft pick, but top prospect in the NFL, and found a way to make it work with him. I get it. That being said, dude, this screams, and nobody else wanted our job. Nobody wanted our job, and so we had to settle. This feels very similar to where the Texans were for a few years, where they were just cycling through coaches every single year. I'd be really surprised if this ends up working out. Good for Dave Canales. I hope it works for him. I hope he is able to get the most out of Bryce Young because it's good for the league if we have more competent quarterbacks around the league. But I'd be pretty surprised if it does.
If you needed a motivational speaker for your quarterback, then I think you should have just hired one of those. I don't think I would hire somebody as my head coach to be my motivational speaker for my quarterback. I mean, like, that roster is in shambles, and sure, maybe you get the best out of Bryce Young, but that doesn't mean you're going to become a winning team. And I understand they're probably giving this some leeway, like Carolina's going to suck for a couple of years, especially because, you traded your first overall draft pick away, but this confuses me, but you're right. My initial thought was, cool, so nobody wanted to go coach in Carolina, and this was the only guy that said it's my only opportunity to be a head coach. But if I'm Carolina, I think I want somebody that's got a little bit more experience in terms of trying to take a team that's from the depths of hell into actually competing in the NFL.
See, I don't mind this. I think you guys are right, though. I think this was a settle. Let's just bring him in. He's the only guy that wants this freaking job because Dave Tepper's made this one of the worst places to work in the NFL. But I don't mind this because I don't think you could get a veteran head coach, and you just tried that with Frank Reich, and it was a disaster. So I don't mind going with a young offensive mind, worked with Geno, see if you build some confidence in Bryce Young. And you know what? Worst case scenario, if it doesn't work out, at least we got the guy that's the scapegoat in 3 years, that he's going to be here, it's going to suck. And as we start to draft and develop some guys, then we'll just kick him out the door, then we'll bring in the actual veteran coach when we're ready for him. So I don't mind the hire. I'm interested to see if it works out at all for him. I don't think it will. I think this is a hired to be fired scenario. Yeah. But I don't mind it. I think they went down the right path.
It is hilarious, though, that the guy that made Baker Mayfield work in Tampa the year after Carolina tried to make him work with the Panthers. And they were like, that guy made it work with Baker. Maybe he can make it work with our new guy. Yeah, it is pretty funny that that's the coach that they decided to go out there and make.
But am I far off on this? Like, I think the personalities are night and day with Baker Mayfield and Bryce Young.
I think so.
Baker Mayfield's a dude that's going to fight no matter what. I'm not sure that's the same with Bryce Young.
No, they're incredibly different as personalities and as players. Like, their games could not be more dissimilar. Bryce Young is very on time. He wants to drop back, see it, throw it. Baker is very much a guy that is like scramble mode. I'm going to make something out of nothing. I'm going to go run 7 yards and lower my shoulder and put my helmet into the side of a linebacker, right? Like, that's Baker Mayfield. So it's different in basically every possible way, but they've got their hire in Carolina, and I think it's going to fail spectacularly, most likely. All right, the other hire that was made yesterday, Alex, was Jim Harbaugh. He's going to the LA Chargers. I don't think this one's going to fail. I'd be surprised if it fails as impacts. The last time Jim Harbaugh got an NFL gig, he was hired by the 49ers. They were, I believe it was 7-9 the year before he got there. He drafts a quarterback, and they end up going to the conference championship game that first season with Jim Harbaugh at the helm with Colin Kaepernick as their starter. The next year, they go to the Super Bowl. The next year, they go to the conference championship. And then things start to fall apart because that's kind of the way that it works with Jim Harbaugh as your head coach. You get like 3 to 5 years, and you say, thank you for winning a bunch of games for us. We're going to go our separate ways now. With the Chargers, this is a team that's done a lot of losing. They find ways to lose at the end of games because that's who they are. Can Jim Harbaugh change that, Alex? Can he be the guy that comes in and makes them into a winner again?
I think if you got the right players, he absolutely can. This was the smartest decision that they could have done, is to hire Jim Harbaugh. And I think what you did, if you're the Chargers, is say, we've got 3 to 5 years, that window you just put on Harbaugh. That's the amount of time we have to win a Super Bowl with this roster, because if we don't, it's blowing up. We're not going to be able to afford it. We're going to have to start researching again. It's not going to pan out. So let's go get a coach that we know can take a average team and turn them into a team that can compete. But it does come back to the players. Like, are the players willing to have the mindset of Jim Harbaugh? Because at least in the experience of looking at coaches that don't last very long in certain places, whether it's in hockey or baseball or any pro sports, typically they're a-holes, and the players have to be okay with that if they want to win. Like Philadelphia with John Tortorella is a perfect example. Like, if you're cool with your coach being an a-hole because you want to win, then you're going to have success. So are they tough enough to handle Jim Harbaugh? Because if you are, then I think they're going to be a Super Bowl contender within 3 years.
Yeah, and I don't even think Harbaugh falls in that category, because I think Harbaugh is a great head coach, and I think the reason he ran out in San Francisco was a power clash with the front office.
But I think that's natural. Like, I think that happened. He got into a power clash with his AD at Michigan.
Yeah, well, yeah.
I think that's coming for him at some point in time with the Chargers as well.
Hey,
I'd be surprised if he's there more than 5 years from now.
Yeah, I agree with that, because I think he'll probably go back to the college game in 5 years. But I think
he's the Alabama head coach, Jim Harbaugh.
Oh, I like that. But I think he's the perfect hire, because I think the only piece that was missing from the LA Chargers roster was a competent head coach. Now, yes, they have some holes defensively, but you can see the foundation with Bosa there. Offensively, you've got the guy at quarterback. You've got really good weapons at wide receiver. You've got a pretty good running back in Eckler. Like, they've got the pieces of a championship caliber roster. I mean, I don't know if they'll ever be able to get through Mahomes, but now Harbaugh's the guy that takes you from being a 8-win team to potentially being like a 12-win team and competing in the AFC West.
I think he will do for them what Doug Peterson did with the Jaguars in year one. The Jaguars were 3-14 under Urban Meyer in 2021. It was an abject failure in every possible way. They had won 1 game and 3 games in their previous 2 years. And then they won 9 games, lost in the divisional round. Of course, they failed spectacularly. But the Jaguars became a competent organization again. I think that's what Jim Harbaugh brings to the Chargers. I think they're going to make the playoffs next year. I think they'll win 9 or 10 games, and you will see a better version of Justin Herbert. By the way, we're about to find out what Justin Herbert's made of. Yep. Because I think what I've found out about Trevor Lawrence over the last couple of years is he's not everything he was cracked up to be. He's fine. He's a good quarterback, top 10 to 12 in the league. I would like to have him as my starter. But he ain't in the Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow tier. He is not up in that top 5 to 7 category. He's not even C.J. Stroud in my mind. I've heard for years how Justin Herbert is such a stud, and he's this great quarterback. He is right on the cusp of being in that tier with Mahomes, with Allen. I haven't seen it. The guy went 5-12 this year. And at some point, that's on you as much as it's on your coach. You've got to find a way to prop up your team. You can't allow that to happen. We're about to find out exactly how much of that was on Brandon Staley and how much of that was on Justin Herbert. Because if you're the guy, the way that people think, you should win 9, 10, 11 games next year with Jim Harbaugh at the helm. So I'll be very curious to see what this means for the Chargers. I do think it's going to work, but we'll find out. We'll see what it ends up looking like next season. All right, coming up in about 15 minutes or so, we'll get into questions and answers. By the way, one other quick piece of news to pass along on the NFL coaching search side of things. I don't think we're going to see Bill Belichick hired this cycle. It was reported today that the Atlanta Falcons job is wide open, that he is not the front runner for that gig. I think he's going to get passed up. I'm guessing you were right, T-Bone. He's probably asking for too much control. Team said, we're not doing it. And he said, okay, cool. I'll just pass up on a job. I cannot believe that this is going to happen, but here we are. All right, Joey Vitale, Blues analyst, coming up next here on 101 ESPN.
Tanner Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Last night, the St. Louis Blues beat the Vancouver Canucks in overtime as they beat Vancouver 4-3, and the Blues will be back in action here coming up when they visit the Seattle Kraken tomorrow night, and we'll have pregame coverage starting at 8 o'clock with Alex Ferrario, puck drop at 9 o'clock with Chris Kerber. This Sports Update was driven by Johnny Londoff. Find your road shop 24/7 at londoff.com, londoffautoPlex.com. Are you kidding me?
Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Happy to go out to the 101 ESPN hotline to talk to Joey Vitale, our Blues analyst for 101 ESPN. And you've seen him in the last couple of games on Bally Sports Midwest, pre, post, and intermission. Joe, we appreciate the time as always, my friend. How you doing today?
Joey! I love you on Bally Sports Midwest.
Going crazy for me. Hey, appreciate you guys. I'm doing great. It never gets old, by the way. Keep that coming.
Joe, first question is the most important. Do you miss me when you don't have me on pregames with you?
Hey, I'll be honest with you. I do, Alex. We have amazing chemistry.
Let's go.
What I don't miss is Curbs every now and then hijacking our pregame show. I don't miss that. And I would tell that to him to his face, so I'm okay. I'm in the clear to say that. But no, I do. It's so different, right? It's just you're calling a game. You're on top of every moment. You're trying to catch all the hows and the whys when you're doing the play-by-play and the color alongside Chris, of course. And then the pre-intermission in post is very different. You're breaking down what we're expecting. You really get into detail about the game to come. And then you have to look at a whole period and really kind of pick out maybe one or two things, and that's it. So it's very different. I enjoy both of them, and I'm certainly excited to hop back in the saddle with you. That's kind of weird, in the same saddle, but we're going to be in the same show, rather, Sunday afternoon as we welcome the LA Kings back to town.
Some BK say that Joe is the Sidney Crosby, and I'm the Evgeny Malkin of Blues pre- and post games.
That, huh?
Yeah.
I would say it's more like Joe's the Sidney Crosby, and you're somebody else.
That's fine. Just fine by me.
Wow, that's
No
horrible.
one has ever said any of those things.
Some would say Joe is like the Pavel Datsyuk in the Joe Vitale trade, and I'm the first-round pick.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's more.
That makes sense.
Probably more of our speed.
All right, Joe, before we get to the Blues game from last night, I do have a quick question for you because you have Cheaper by the Dozen at home. I have my first that is about 6 months old now. Yesterday was the first time when he started crawling around our house.
No.
It was the first experience that we had with that. Joe, what's coming my way? What should I be prepared for?
Disaster. Sleepless nights, anxiety, panic attacks like you've never experienced.
Okay. Yeah.
Before you gotta put everything away that's smaller than the size of a marble. Just chuck everything away. You're heading into the cleansing period of your life where, like I said, anything smaller than a quarter, just don't even hide or put up. Just throw away, because especially with your first, the anxiety you feel when there's something small on the ground, because those little critters, again, they have a tendency to put anything in their mouth. So you think it got busy when you got pregnant or when you had a baby and a newborn. You're about to enter a whole nother phase. But at the same time, it is a very rewarding phase, and pretty soon that little monster is going to be crawling, then walking, and then speaking. So just a part of the process, but it definitely is a little bit different, and you're definitely going to have to be a little bit more on your toes. The days of just sitting back and laying the little one down on a rocker or a sleeper or stepping away at least just to go to the bathroom, those days are over. I mean, that's probably what I miss most. I haven't gone to the bathroom by myself probably in, I would say, a solid 10 years. I mean, honest to God, it's like every time I excuse myself to go to the restroom, there's like a dum, Dad, I gotta say something. Dad, can I come in? Dad, can I go potty with you? I'm like, Sure, everyone. I mean, it's just like it's like an airport terminal. Every time I go into it's
the
like
old style saloon, right, where they're just like passing through the door constantly.
Honest to God, I might as well just take out my door with the lock on it and put one of those wooden swinging doors into our bathroom, because that's what's coming your way, BK. So enjoy every second of it.
Sometimes when Joe walks into the broadcast booth, he's like, his eyes are bugged out, his hair's all over the place, and he's like, oh, what a day. And I've never related more with Joe when he walks in and says that.
Oh, my God. Yeah, I mean, even like last night's game, too. I mean, it was obviously a late start, as you know, Alice, because you were on the pregame show. But, a 9 o'clock start on these Western Conference or these West Coast trips. And, I'm helping put the babies to bed.
Yeah.
And it's a grind of a life. And then all of a sudden you got to show up and put on your smiling face and bring some energy, which – of course, is a little bit of a challenge, but I'm not complaining, and none of us really should at the end of the day, because we're very blessed to have kids and have a great family. So, but it is certainly challenging. It is certainly challenging.
Absolutely.
And we get to talk Blues hockey for a living, which is a nice way to go about it. All right, Joe, let's break down that game from last night just a bit, because we said earlier today our big takeaway, man, 2 straight games, right? I'm not sure that the Blues were the better team, but they come out with 2 points in each of them, and ultimately, that's what matters. They've got to keep racking up these points. What did you take away from last night's victory in Vancouver?
What I took away is that I keep going back to the fact that I literally have no idea what's going on, and I don't know what I'm talking about, because, like you said, BK, you look at the final stats of that game, and we had a rundown on the post-game show for Bally Sports, and, I mean, this is a Blues team that, once again, they get outshot, they get out-chanced, they get out-attempted, they got out-hit. They had 16 defensive turnovers, only to the 3 for the Vancouver Canucks. I mean, the offensive zone time was extremely lopsided in favor of Vancouver. Number 1 team in the National Hockey League. If you were to show me those stats at the end of the game and said, Joey, tell me who's going to win this game, or at least predict the score, I would say we're probably going to lose 5-2, maybe with an empty netter. I mean, that's the way the stats are predicting things, but it's actually gone the complete opposite, which is quite an anomaly when you look at it. And this is something the Blues just kind of continue to figure out a way to do, is even though the stats are a bit lopsided at times, and even though you are being outchanced, and even though at times the momentum certainly is not in your favor, this is a team that's figuring out ways to win games. And to me, the 2 biggest reasons for that, number 1, you're seeing a resilient group that is okay playing from behind. That has become a characteristic of this group. They seem very patient in that setting. They seem very patient in that philosophy of just, we're not going to win the game in the first period, but we can certainly lose the game. And that's where we have to stay patient and stay tight defensively. That's number 1. And I think the biggest thing and the biggest takeaway for all Blues fans out there when you look at this team and how lopsided it can be, but they're still figuring out ways to get points, is we are very blessed. We have an incredible goaltender tandem right now. I mean, with Joe Hofer certainly standing on his head last night. I mean, Jordan Binnington was incredible a couple nights ago there in Calgary. And this just remains to be seen as the St. Louis team continues to find points because of those 2 guys in the back end. And to kind of compare it to some really good teams that maybe have not such good goaltending. I mean, even look at the last 2 teams the Blues have faced. I mean, I've never been a Jacob Markstrom fan. I've always found him to be a little holy at times and just kind of lackadaisical. And you saw that goal that Brandon saw late in that game with 48 ticks to go. It was just, he didn't seem ready. He seemed like his legs weren't engaged late in that game to make that final save. And so that, and then you look at the Smith last night. Yeah, it's a great Vancouver team, but some of those goals, I can't see those ones getting past a Binnington or a Joe Hofer. So at the end of the day, what's sometimes lacking at the offensive side or defensive side for St. Louis this year, they have certainly made up with these 2 backstoppers.
Joe, Jake Neighbours has himself another great night last night. He's got 15 goals, second most on the team, and we've talked a lot about how Jake Neighbours has really impressed this season. The more I watch him, the more I believe that the Blues might have a sneaky top-line power forward that a lot of people might not be talking enough about.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think that, he's starting to get more and more recognized now because the numbers and the offensive production is starting to come out. I mean, we've always known what Jake is, Alex and BK, because, we watch him on a daily basis. I think for St. Louis fans, they're starting to see this kid really evolve into becoming something great. But I think from a national standpoint, if you look around the league and, fans and experts and teams from all over the country and, of course, Canada, I don't think they've given Jake enough respect, but he is starting now to get the respect he deserves because the points are starting to really stand out. And, of course, now he's a top 6 forward on a good team making a playoff push in the St. Louis Blues. With all that being said, you look at Jake, and to me, what do I see? What do I project? What can fans expect to see over the next half a decade to a decade? Hopefully, wearing a St. Louis Blues uniform. Is you're looking at another Braden Shen. I mean, he really is. And he's got the size, he's got the skill, he's got the tenacity. And the biggest thing he has that reminds me so much of our captain right now in Braden Shen is he has the intelligence. He's got the wisdom of the game. He's a student of the game. He's constantly observing the game. He's always been a fan of hockey. He's watched a ton of hockey. And when you watch a lot of hockey, you're going to start really picking up on certain things. You start surrounding yourselves with good people. He's been around the Ryan O'Reillys, and he's roomed with Braden Shen. So he's been around great people there as well. So his youthful energy certainly has been carrying the Blues through this midseason stretch. We call this the post-halfway Blues, where, that was 15 to 20 games right after the halfway point before the trade deadline, and, of course, that playoff push. This is a tough portion of the season. I mean, they're on a road trip with some tough weather. They come back to St. Louis. It's been tough weather, a lot of gray, and, you're certainly over the halfway hump, but you're not quite in that final push just yet. So this is where you lean on young players with lots of energy and lots of determination, of course, in Jake Neighbours. And it really is great to see his offensive numbers match the spirit he has had over the last few seasons here for St. Louis.
Joe, it's been fun watching you over on Bally Sports Midwest. I'm excited to listen to you once again here in the next few days for Blues versus the Kings right here on 101 ESPN on Sunday afternoon. All the best to you and the family. We'll talk with you again soon, my man.
Hey, sounds great. You too. Always a pleasure talking to you as well. And BK, like I said, stay on your toes. The good days are coming for sure.
I'm just trusting the process. This is Joey Vitale, Blues analyst for 101 ESPN and Bally Sports Midwest. You'll see him on the call for pre, post, and intermission on Friday night between the Blues and the Seattle Kraken. Alex will have pre, post, and intermission right here on 101 ESPN for that one. Your home of the Blues starting at 8 o'clock.
With Chris Kerber.
Looking forward to it.
Joe left me hanging. But that's okay. He's on Bally Sports Midwest.
Yeah, he's doing well.
Yeah,
I enjoy him. He's doing a really good job, by the way, on the pre and post.
Last night was the first night I had the opportunity. So peek behind the curtains. I worked from home last night in my studio underneath my staircase, that little closet that I have. So I got to actually watch some of the game and listen to a little bit of the intermission and the pre-games that Joe was on before I went on the air. And I think Joe breaks the game. I mean, he does it with me every single game, but I think Joe breaks it down in a way that it just gives the current player perspective, because he's in that locker room so much, and he's such good friends with those guys that he gives a really good perspective on the game. So I enjoyed it.
He does a really good job. So looking forward to Blues versus Kraken on Friday night. We will also talk a little bit about Jake Neighbours coming up at the 12 o'clock hour, because he's been awesome, man. And the numbers are starting to become eye-popping, especially when you compare what he's doing at his age to previous Blues at his age. We'll get into some of that and what his future could hold for the Blues coming up at 12:30. But coming up next, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers here on 101 ESPN. Alongside Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. Before we get to some of your questions, I do want to pass along some news from the NFL as they have released all of their finalists for the end-of-season awards. Alex, I think a fun way to do this will be you guys guess, because I've got them in front of me. You guys guess who you think are the finalists. I'll let you know if you are on the right track or not. There are 5 finalists for each of these awards, all right? We'll try to skip through these as quick as possible. Well, let's start with the biggest one, MVP. Who do you guys think are the 5 finalists for the MVP award this year?
Lamar.
Yes.
Pat Mahomes.
Nope.
Wow. Josh Allen.
Yep.
Oh.
Tyreek Hill.
Nope.
Dak.
Yep.
Christian
Purdy.
McCaffrey.
Yep.
It's Purdy.
Yep. Those are the 5. Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Christian McCaffrey, Dak Prescott, and Brock Purdy. I'm a little surprised that Mahomes isn't top 5 and that Tyreek Hill did not get top 5.
I'm not with Mahomes because I guess the numbers just don't back it up. But, I mean, especially when you've seen with what he done, I can understand why people would think it. The Tyreek Hill one surprises the hell out of me. Tyreek Hill
goes back to the conversation. It's a quarterback award, man. If Brock Purdy is getting more votes than Tyreek Hill, that tells you everything you need to know. Just never put any money on a non-quarterback to get it because they're not going to win.
It would have been Tyreek over Brock Purdy. That would have been my 5.
Who do you think finishes second? Because we know Lamar's going to win this award. Who do you think finishes second?
I think it's going to be Josh Allen because of the amount of touchdowns thrown and because of the amount of touchdowns rushed.
And I think it'll be because of the 5-game winning streak to finish out the year. I agree. I think Josh Allen finishes second.
And then I think Dak will be 3rd, McCaffrey will be 4th, and Purdy will be 5th.
I could see where Dak gets second. I could see where Dak gets second. I thought I think he was better overall than Josh Allen.
All right, Coach of the Year. Coach of the Year finalist. Who you got?
Okay, well, McCarthy's going to be in this.
Nope. Wow.
I mean, let's just be honest, McCarthy sucks.
Well, yeah, he sucks, but the team still won 11 games.
D'Amico Ryans.
Yep.
Kyle Shanahan.
Yep.
In there?
Nope.
Okay.
Get the hell out of here.
I mean, he got that team to the playoffs when we weren't expecting it.
Yeah,
but one more guess and then I'll finish it up. I'm
Colts coach. I can't think of his name.
Dan Campbell.
Oh,
John Harbaugh.
Duh.
D'Amico Ryans.
Duh.
Kyle Shanahan.
Oh, and Mike McDaniel.
Nope. Kevin Stefanski.
Makes sense.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. You won with freaking Joe Flacco. Dan Campbell.
I think so, too. I think it'll be Campbell getting Detroit to the playoffs.
I think Stefanski should. I think Campbell will. I think Campbell's a deserving winner. When you win with Joe Flacco and Dorian Thompson-Robinson and P.J. Walker
and Deshaun
Watson over the course of a season, I think that's deserving of getting you to
be fair, they didn't do a lot of winning with Deshaun Watson.
That's fair. The finalists for Defensive Player of the Year, Deron Bland, Max Crosby, Myles Garrett, Micah Parsons, T.J. Watt. Who would you
Myles
be your
Garrett
pick
needs
for
to
that
freaking win that. Myles Garrett has to win that
he
one.
Was unbelievable this year for
That's
the Browns.
only reason they won the playoff or got to the playoffs.
I would probably go with him as well. Your AP Offensive Player of the Year finalists: Tyreek Hill, Lamar, CeeDee Lamb, Christian McCaffrey, and Dak Prescott. I think Tyreek Hill will win this.
It's either Tyreek. Did you say McCaffrey was on it? It's either Tyreek or McCaffrey.
I could see McCaffrey winning. I think Tyreek Hill should win it, but
McCaffrey had the longest touchdown streak ever, right, in terms of games?
Yeah, I don't remember what the number was.
I don't remember what it was, but it was from like the end of last season to that season. He scored a touchdown in every single game, and I thought it was the longest ever.
And then the final one here is Comeback Player of the Year. The 2 that matter are Joe Flacco and Damar Hamlin. I think it's going to end up going to Damar Hamlin. I would personally give it to Joe Flacco.
I think it's crazy that Baker Mayfield didn't get into the final two.
Mayfield's on here. Stafford's on here, too. I think they got the right finalists here. I think the 2 that really will be up for the competition to win it are Flacco and Hamlin. I think they'll probably end up
Who's the Rookie of the Year?
Rookie of the Year.
I mean, obviously, it's going to be C.J. Stroud.
Finalists. Give me 1 sec.
I don't know who else. Who
Tank
else?
Dell would be in there.
Oh, yeah, Tank Dell.
Your boy, Puka Nacua.
Will
be in there.
Is there any defensive? I don't think Will Anderson would be on
offensive and defensive. So Jahmyr Gibbs, Sam Laporta, Puka Nacua, C.J. Stroud, and Bijan Robinson on the offensive side.
Yeah,
on
Stroud
the defensive side, Will Anderson, Jalen Carter, Joey Porter Jr., Kobe Turner, or Devon Witherspoon. I think that'll be either Anderson or Kobe Turner is what it sounds like.
Makes sense.
Most likely. All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. We'll get to a few of your questions real quick. From the 314, guys, believe it or not, Jake Neighbours will be the next Blues captain.
Oh, not believe that. That'll be Robert Thomas. I think Robert Thomas will be the captain until he's done being a Blue. Maybe Neighbours gets it after Thomas. I could see Neighbours being a captain, but Thomas is the next Blues captain.
That's what I would say is it's probably Thomas ahead of Neighbours just because he's been here longer. And maybe they go the route of no captain. I could see that as well once Shen is gone. But if they do, I would say Thomas first.
Army's got a coach. Berube was the one that wanted a captain, and Berube's not here. So if they do go down that path, that would make sense.
I'll say believe it. I think Jake Neighbours gets it.
But you said next captain.
Yep.
You think he gets it over Thomas?
Yep.
Wow.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line from the 636. BK, what are your thoughts on the state of Mizzou basketball right now? It seems to be turning on Gates already. It's a bad year. It's a really, really, really terrible season. And I honestly have just not even been watching lately. There's just no reason to tune in. Like, I'm not missing anything. We're not going to talk about them on the show. They are not I would rather talk about the Mizzou defensive coordinator situation right now than I would Mizzou basketball. There's nothing compelling about this
Mizzou
team.
doesn't win an SEC game, right?
They'll win one just because basketball's weird and like they'll come up with like 4 or 5 wins this year. Okay, even when they had Kimmy Anderson, they had Kimmy Anderson as the coach and they won in the SEC.
Let's go down the worst coach now.
Let's go down the path that they don't win, though.
They will. If they don't, then we'll talk about that. But they'll win a game. They almost won the other night. They're just bad. They don't have enough talent. They missed in the portal, and the young kids are still young. So give it another year. They've got a great recruiting class coming in. If he sucks again next year, Dennis Gates, then we'll have a conversation about it.
Don't they have like 2 5-star recruits coming in next year?
They've got a top 5 recruiting class in the country.
Chill out, T-Bone.
They'll be fine.
They should decommit.
We'll be fine.
Look at that program. A disaster.
All right, final thing here from the 847. Guys, what do you think the next Cardinals move will be? I think it'll be a bullpen arm that you guys probably aren't familiar with. That would be my guess.
Contract extension for John Mozeliak at spring training.
Stop it.
No, he's going to retire. Not at
Heim
spring training,
Bloom
but
named the president of baseball operation in waiting. There's no more roster moves.
I think they're getting I agree with PK. It's a bullpen arm that nobody's heard of before, to where you see the signing and go, did that guy pitch in the majors last year? And then when you look up, you go, oh, yeah, he played 2 games. Yeah, and it had like a 50% strikeout rate. But yeah, I think it's going to be something
I feel like it'll be a guy that you look up and you see the numbers on Baseball Reference. You're like, oh, that guy's pretty good.
Yeah.
And I think that'll be it. And then that's the end of the conversation for
I think it's possible it's a guy coming back from an injury, too. Like, I could see, like, I looked this up yesterday, Carl Edwards, who was with Washington, coming off of a shoulder fracture, which I don't know how you do that, but it could be something like that, where he had a really good year, but he missed a lot of time due to an injury, and they bring him in on like a 1-year, $2 million deal.
5-year contract extension for Matt Carpenter.
You're being ridiculous. Coming up in about 15 minutes or so, we're going to play a game of Can You Beat the Blues? It is the return of the game that we played last year. It is the game that is sweeping the nation. There will be 3 different players against current Blues. The players that you're going up against today are Oscar Sundqvist and Robert Thomas. The winner, Alex, am I correct on this? You get a signed puck by Oscar Sundqvist?
Mm-hmm. And a pair
Blues
of tickets. Yep, Edmonton Oilers game, I think it is.
So 3 of you will get the opportunity to go up against current Blues, Oscar Sundqvist and Robert Thomas in different categories. You'll have 15 seconds to name as many different things within that category as you can. If you name more than the Blues player, the person that has the biggest margin, you'll be getting those Blues tickets and the signed puck by Oscar Sundqvist. That's coming up in about 15 minutes. Coming up next, how does the Cardinals' current rotation compared to the rotations that went to the World Series out of the National League in recent years? I've got some numbers. I think it'll be an interesting comparison. We'll get into it next here on 101 ESPN. Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Coming up in about 15 minutes or so, we'll get to a game of Can You Beat the Blues? If you want to participate today against Oscar Sundqvist or Robert Thomas, and you're interested in, a pair of tickets to see the Blues versus Connor McDavid and future Blue Leon Draisaitl coming up on February 15th, you can win those tickets and a signed Oscar Sundqvist puck by texting in right now. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. We will pick 3 of you to go up against Oscar Sundqvist and Robert Thomas in our game of Can You Beat the Blues? That'll be coming up here in just a little bit. Text in right now, I can beat the Blues. And if you are selected, you'll be going up against one of Sonny or Robert Thomas. All right, Alex, let's talk a little bit about these St. Louis Cardinals. Because all offseason we've been saying, hey, the Cardinals have a problem here, and they don't seem to see it.
The Cardinals are coming. The Cardinals are coming.
No, they're not. The Cardinals have a problem, which is their number 2 starter. They have a number 1 starter that I like. Now, if you want to call him a number 2 that is masquerading as a number 1, who is not an ace, as Randy Carricker has, that's fine. We can disagree we can quibble on the differences between number 1 and number 2. But he's good. And so you've got a guy in that spot that you feel confident in.
Not in the playoffs.
Fair enough. The rest of the players, 3 through 5, I'm mostly okay with. I think you've got some upside with Steven Matz if he stays healthy. I think you've got some veteran ability and availability with Gibson, Lynn, Michaelis that are fine in 3 and 4.
It's like when girls in high school told me I had a great personality. I'm like, cool, so I'm ugly.
I don't have an issue with those guys slotting in 3 and 4.
Yeah.
I don't love him as a number 2. But I wanted to look yesterday, Alex, at the teams that made the World Series out of the National League to find out, okay, am I being too hard on the Cardinals? Am I being unfair about what they are likely to get out of their number 2 starter? Let's look back at the last 5 teams. I took away 2020. It's a fake COVID season. The Dodgers are not part of this. So the 2023 Diamondbacks.
That didn't count.
2022 Phillies, 2021 Braves, 2019 Nationals, 2018 Dodgers. Those are the last 5 National League teams to make it to the World Series in a full season. And I went through 1 through 5. In each individual spot, your number 1 starter, number 2 starter, and so on. What was their ERA at the end of the season? Very simple. I'm not getting into advanced metrics here. This is just very simple. The number 1 starter had a 3.5 ERA last season for the Arizona Diamondbacks. The number 3 starter had a 3.7 ERA for the 2022 Phillies, and so on. And then I averaged it out. What did the number 1 starters have for National League teams that went to the World Series? Number 2 starter, and so on. And so, Alex, you tell me if you believe the Cardinals starters can reach these benchmarks at the end of the season, okay?
Okay.
The average number 1 starter for National League teams that made it to the World Series over the last 5 seasons finished the year with a 3.1 ERA. A 3.1. Do you think, I would imagine you believe Sonny Gray is the number 1 starter for this team right now.
Kyle Gibson.
Do you think Sonny Gray can get to a 3.1 ERA this year?
Yeah, I think 3.1 is absolutely doable. I think that's why you signed him to that contract. The zips you had written down was 3.5 expected for him this year. I think he's better than that. 3.1. If it's not 3.1, I think something went wrong for the Cardinals.
2 years ago, he was at a 3.1 exactly. Last year, he was at a 2.8 for the Minnesota Twins.
That's where I expect him to be.
He did that over the course of roughly 300 innings for the Twins over the last 2 seasons. So he has reached those benchmarks over the last couple of years. T-Bone, do you think he can get to a 3.1 this year?
Yeah, I think he can be at a 3.1. I mean, you mentioned he's been there the last 2 years. He's got stuff that can play to that level. He gets anything above like a 3.25, then there's going to be serious problems for the St. Louis Cardinals.
All right, the number 2 starter, the average number 2 starter. We'll skip it. We'll come back to it here in just a little bit. Number 3 starter on average over the last 5 seasons that went to the World Series for the National League had an average of a 3.9 ERA. Alex, let's assume Gibson, Lynn, Matz. One of those 3 is your number 3 starter. Because Michaelis, I think we can all agree.
Let's put Gibson in there.
Cool. Kyle Gibson, do you think he can get to a 3.9 ERA this season?
I think Gibson can do a 3.9 ERA. I'm a little skeptical. It might be a little bit north of that, like maybe 4.0, 4.1 at worst, but I still think you're in that vicinity. So 3.9, I believe, is doable for Kyle Gibson.
So I don't think Gibson or Lynn can do it. I think Matz can be a 3.9. I think Matz can be a 3.9 now. How many starts he makes is a big question mark because of his health. But when he's healthy, he's pitched well. I think if Matz is right, he can pitch to a 3.9 ERA.
So you think they have somebody that can get there?
Yes.
The number 4 starter on average, a 4.0 ERA, is what these starters for the World Series representatives have averaged over the last 5 years coming out of the National League. Do you believe, Alex, the Cardinals have? You had Kyle Gibson as your number 3, so your number 4, Matz or Lynn. Do you believe one of those two can get to a 4.0 ERA?
No, I don't. Because I don't think Matz is going to be able to stay healthy enough for you, which means you're going to be doing a little dual action. And I don't believe Lance Lynn is getting 4.0. So, no, I don't think you have that.
Yeah. I don't think you have that either. I just think Lance Lynn's probably going to be sitting 4.5 to 5, and I think Kyle Gibson, he hasn't had a 4 ERA since 21, okay. I don't think he can do that. I think he probably sits more in kind of where he was last year, 4.5, 4.7 range.
And the number 5 starter is a 4.6 ERA. Whoever you think that's going to be,
T-Bone. 2 guys that can do that.
You guys think that they can reach that threshold?
I think one guy, if he gets to that, it's going to be a career year.
All right, so T-Bone's kind of in line. You're like, okay, you know what? I'm not sure they can get that from their 4 starter, but otherwise, 1, 3, 4, 5. For the most part, you're around that range that these National League contenders had. Alex, you were certainly more skeptical.
1-3, I think, is doable. 4-5, not so much.
Okay. I would probably lean a little bit more towards T-Bone's side. I think they're roughly around that range. You might be a little below, but we've seen outliers. Like the Diamondbacks didn't meet all of these thresholds either. You could get there, and you probably do it with more innings than many of these teams did. It comes out in the wash.
If you don't reach that number 4 mark that I said that I don't know if they have, like, you should win. When your number 4 starter starts, you probably win that game because you're offense.
Sure. And you could go trade for a number 4 starter. Maybe that guy's not currently on the roster. They've shown an ability and a willingness to do that. Now let's get to the number 2 starter. Because, Alex, over the last 5 years, the number 2 starter for the Diamondbacks had a 3.3 ERA. The number 2 starter for the Phillies had a 3.3 ERA. The number 2 starter for the Braves had a 3.0 ERA. The number 2 starter for the Nationals had a 3.3. And the number 2 starter for the Dodgers back in 2018, 2.6 ERA. On average, your number 2 starter for the National League team that made it to the World Series over the past 5 seasons is a 3.3. Alex, the number 2 starter on the Cardinals currently is Miles Mikolas. Do you believe he can get to a 3.3?
No, I don't. I think you have to have a career best out of Miles Mikolas, and I know he's done that, but I don't think where we're at right now with Miles Mikolas, he can do that. I think if I was projecting with Miles Mikolas, he'd be more in line with that other 4.0 ERA that we talked about, which would be your 4 starter or 3 starter right now in your rotation. I don't think you've got a guy that can get to that 3.3 ERA.
Yeah, I don't think you do either. I think Mikolas is more of a high 3s ERA, 3.9 to low 4s ERA, like 4, 4.10.
How do we explain his 2022 season?
I hate to say this, but I think a lot, like a pitcher that pitches to contact, I think a lot of it is a little bit of luck involved.
I also think that was incredible defense that year.
Yeah.
I think incredible defense led Miles Mikolas to that ERA.
And I think
that's it. He had a 3.3 exactly on the dot.
What did he have the year he was Cy Young candidate?
2.8. Like
so he could do it.
He has had, in his last 4 regular seasons in which he was healthy, 2 of them he reached this threshold. 2.8 in 2018 and a 3.3 in 2022. Now, those are 4 years apart. There was a lot of unhealthy seasons in there, and last year he was at a 4.8. That wouldn't even reach the number 5 starter threshold that we're talking about here.
That 2.8 in 2018 is impressive to me because that defense was not good. You had Jed Jerko at third base. You had Marcell Ozuna in the outfield.
He was excellent that season.
Yeah,
legitimately a great starter for the Cardinals in every possible way.
But that was his first year back from over in Japan, where teams might not have had the same scouting report on him as they do now. I think he's solely a pitch-to-contact pitcher, and unless you have elite defense up the middle, which you might have this season, I don't think Miles Mikolas could be anything more than a 3.5 ERA.
The reason why I bring this up is because I think we talk a lot about, hey, where are the Cardinals at with their front-end starter? And some people think that they're fine. Other people totally disagree with us, and that's fine. But these are the numbers that they're chasing. These are the teams that we are looking to. Like, forget the names. Set the names aside for a second. What do I need out of each spot in my rotation? I think 1, 3, 4, 5, the Cardinals are mostly okay. Those spots in the order. Their problem is the number 2 starter because I don't think Miles Mikolas has a 3.3 ERA in him this year. If he does, The Cardinals are fine, dude. They will be A-okay. Now, you could argue get into the postseason, you don't have enough swing and miss. Like, we'll talk about that when we get there. And maybe at that point, you just add a bunch of relievers at the deadline and you shorten games that way, and that's the way you get through. But their bet going into this season, and when we put our 20 most important players for the 2024 Cardinal season, their bet on 2024 is that Miles Mikolas had an outlier season last year. That is the truth. They are believing, based on what all of these numbers are, based on what their rotation looks like, Miles Mikolas is still a front-end starting pitcher. And if they're right on that, they're going to be a real contender in the National League. If they end up being wrong, it will be as big of a mistake as what they made last year in betting on Jack Flaherty to turn it around, on betting on the young pitchers being able to fill in capably at the back end of your rotation, on betting on their outfield to be able to solidify itself, on betting on not having too many options. Like all of these things that they did last year, they are putting all of those bets into one player in 2024. His name is Miles Mikolas, and they need to be right.
And I think what that means is that you are under the belief that what the Cardinals told you last year, that he had the setback of the World Baseball Classic and he never got right last season. But like when I look at the amount of hits he gave up last year, 226, which led Major League Baseball, and then the year prior when he had that 3.29 ERA, he gave up 170 hits. So like, I understand that's less, but I mean, you're talking 50 less in the same amount of innings. He had elite defense when he was that guy. And unless you have two Gold Glovers in the outfield, like he had with O'Neill and Harrison Bader, you have a dominant infield when it was Arenado, DeYoung, Edman, and Goldschmidt, and you got a really good catcher behind the plate like he had with Yadier Molina. 3.29 seems far-fetched for me.
Coming up in about 15 minutes or so, we got to talk big picture about Jake Neighbours because he continues to exceed expectations. What does his future look like? Where does he belong in the lineup over the long haul? We'll talk about that coming up in about 15 minutes or so, but coming up next, we're playing the latest edition of Can You Beat the Blues? We have our three contestants. They'll be going up against Oscar Sundquist and Robert Thomas. On the line today, Alex, is a signed puck by Oscar Sundquist and a pair of tickets to see the Blues versus the Edmonton Oilers coming up on February 15th. We'll play a game of Can You Beat the Blues next year on 101 ESPN. Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. It's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Coming up in about 10 minutes or so, we'll talk about Jake Neighbours' future with the Blues. It looks pretty positive right about now. Where does he belong in the lineup? We'll get into all of that coming up here in just a little bit. But right now, it is time for our game. We like to call it, Can You Beat the Blues? It is a very simple game. You will have 15 seconds to name as many different things within a specific category as you can. The caller with the largest margin of victory, or the caller that loses by the fewest, depending on how these go, will win a pair of tickets to see the Blues versus the Oilers. That game is coming up on February 15th. They will also go home with an Oscar Sundqvist signed hockey puck. You can't ask for anything more. It is a very simple game, and we have Steven, Ken, and Tony on the line today. They will be going up against two different contestants. Steven and Ken will both go up against Oscar Sundqvist, and Tony will go up against Robert Thomas. Steven, do you understand the rules of the game, my friend? Thanks for calling in today.
Yes, I do.
All right, Steven, you're going up against Oscar Sundqvist today, and your category is places in St. Louis. You can take this in any different direction. Steven, your category is places in St. Louis. On your mark, get set, go.
Cane's, Dairy Queen, Burger King, Jack in the Box, McDonald's, Valvoline, Sunoco, BP's, Quick Trips. Let's see, White Castles.
All right, I've got him down for 10.
Honestly,
that was well done.
Steven,
well done by you. Not the direction I thought you were going to go. Well done by you.
You just need to win for starting to name gas stations and fast food restaurants. That was impressive.
Thank you.
Steven, do you work in like a service industry or something?
I do construction.
There you go. That checks out.
He sees it all. He sees it all.
He went Valvoline and then started going down all the gas
Sunoco.
stations. I was like, you must be a driver of something.
And ended at White Castle, which I think was just the chef's kiss.
All right, so Steven's got 10 different places in St. Louis that he was able to name. How many places can Oscar Sundqvist name?
Go to a City game, go to a Blues game, goes to a Cardinals game, go to a Battlehawk game, go to Botanical Garden, go to On the Hill, go to Billy G's in Kirkwood, go to Louis on the Mon.
Well, are we counting that?
We'll count it.
I feel like he got it.
He just said it long.
We got 8.
So 8.
8 for Sonny?
8 for Sonny.
All right, that's a +2 for our guy Steven going up against Oscar Sundqvist.
Sonny
That's
just
a nice
wouldn't have-
first performance.
Sonny just wouldn't have done the as he probably would have got there.
Or the going to.
Yeah, going to. Come on, Sonny.
All right, so Steven is up to start things out. Our leader in the clubhouse is a +2 right now. Let's go to Ken. Ken is also going up against Oscar Sundqvist. Ken, thanks for calling in today. You ready to go up against Sonny, my friend?
Yes, sir.
All right, you understand the rules of the game?
Yes.
All right, Ken is ready to go. He is going with his category, which is types of food. Name as many different types of food as you can in 15 seconds. Ken, on your mark. Get set. Go.
Mexican, American, Italian, Swedish, Hungarian, Scandinavian, Canadian, Brazilian, burger, steak.
Oh, right before the buzzer. I got you with 9,
He
Ken.
named all of them, and then he said burgers.
I think he just started naming countries.
I don't blame him. Swedish meatballs. Nailed it.
He
Nailed
was
it.
like, you know what, Mexican, American, oh no, I've blanked. Now I'm just going to start naming countries
You know
that
what it
hope that they
was?
produce food.
You said Canadian. I went, what? Is there like a specific type of
poutine.
food?
Yeah.
Okay.
You know what it was? He had to have just gone to
Ketchup,
IKEA,
chips.
and he got some Swedish meatballs. And he
Okay.
said, there you go.
Have you ever had Hungarian food before?
No.
Ken, have you had Hungarian food before?
No.
No, but it's a country, and I know they've got food.
Yeah, I'm sure they produce a little
Exactly.
something.
Get it, Ken.
All right, Ken, let's see how 9 stacks up against Oscar Sundqvist. I think he's a bit of a foodie.
Italian, Korean, Thai, Indian, European, American, Mexican, Ecuadorian.
Ecuadorian. He got fancy on us there. I got
He
8.
got 8, which is exactly a +1, which means, Ken, I'm sorry, but you've been eliminated. You did beat the Blues, but you didn't beat Steven,
Can he get
unfortunately.
+2, though, because he said Hungarian? And I don't think anybody else would have said that.
No, that's a fair point. Sonny also said European, which is,
I don't blame him.
suppose, food.
I mean, that's actually bad on his part because he could have named like all of them in Europe, but he just went European. So
We could have gone French, Italian. He also said
German.
Italian, which I think is European technically.
All right,
but
you know
we'll
what?
give it
We're
to
not
him.
into technicalities here on BK and Ferrario.
All right, we have one player remaining. It is Robert Thomas, and he's going up against Tony today. Tony, do you understand the rules of the game, my friend?
Yes, I do.
All right, do you think you're going to be able to beat Robert Thomas today?
I hope so. I hope I can get through.
I need more confidence out of that, Tony. You're taking on a point per game player right now. We need confidence that you can take down Robert Thomas.
You got to beat him by at least 2, otherwise you're eliminated.
All right.
There we go. All right.
Tony, your category today going up against Robert Thomas is celebrities. Name as many celebrities as you can in 15 seconds. On your mark, get set, go.
Okay, BK, Ferrario, celebrities. We got Robert Thomas, Jordan Bennington, who hit the Blues. George Cairo, Sunquist.
We got 6.
Wait, what was the 6th one?
Sonny.
Oh,
I heard
okay.
Sunquist.
You said Sunquist there at the end, right, Tony?
Yes.
Wait, who are you not going to count? Because
Tony, the Oscars were just announced the other day. You could have gone with any of the nominees for
Are
the
you
Oscars.
kidding me?
You went with 0 of
he
them.
said BK and
You said
Ferrario.
BK and Ferrario.
I'm sitting in the office too much.
That's local celebrities. He nailed it.
That is an absolute F-list celebrity.
Oh, no. Are you kidding me?
Going
A
with the
plus
two of
list.
us.
And I like how he named us before the Blues players. That's even better. Tony, you win in my book.
All right, Tony. So what did he get? He got 7?
Oh, I had him at
I had
6.
6. All right, he got 6.
Did you count over there, man? You shouldn't be a celebrity.
I bet Robert Thomas said Ferrario and BK too.
All right, Robert
didn't know your name.
Thomas is going to
Hey.
name as many different
Hey.
celebrities as he can in 15 seconds. Let's see if
Hurtful.
he can name more than 6. I'm assuming he's not going BK and Ferrario here.
Tom Hanks, Ryan Reynolds, John Hamm, Rob McElhaney, Justin Bieber.
Robert?
Here we go, Robert.
Robert. He fell asleep.
Robert got 5,
But he got 5.
which means Tony got a +1.
No!
And Steven, who went with places in St. Louis and named every
fast food
correspondence you can go to or fast food joint in the city. Steven, congratulations. You can indeed beat the Blues. You're going home with a pair of tickets to see the Blues versus the Oilers on February 15th. And by beating Oscar Sundquist, you're getting an Oscar Sundquist signed puck. Congratulations, my friend.
Thank you very much.
All right. Way to go, Steven.
That's Steven.
I'm happy
He's
for
going
him.
home
I'm
with
happy for him.
Oscar Sundquist signed puck.
It takes a
and
lot
Blues versus Oilers
to come up with places in St. Louis and not name the Arch, the Zoo, Botanical Gardens. Instead, he goes Sonico, Valvoline, Quick Trip, White Castle, Burger King, Jack in the Box.
I'm not going to lie. So I put these together from our recordings from the preseason with these guys yesterday. And when I heard what category he had, I was like, man, I don't know if I could run through all those places. That's impressive coming up with just going with what you see.
You know what?
I would never have thought that.
That is the trick of this game, by the way, is just
Find the
fitting
loophole.
whatever,
Pick one and go.
finding one thing and then just going down the line.
Honestly, what I think, and this is a tinfoil theory for everybody, but I think Steven was driving in between construction gigs and he was naming everything he was driving
What?
past.
See what's up?
Burger King, White Castle, Jack in the Box,
He's got the kids in the back who are like, what are we going to have for dinner today, Dad?
White Castle, Quick Trip.
Honestly, I hope that's true because that's fantastic if it is.
Genius.
If you guys want to get involved in playing a game of Can You Beat the Blues, you will have your opportunity to do so next week here on BK and Ferrario. We're doing this every week, I believe, for the next 6 weeks, if I'm not mistaken.
And next
15
week,
seconds to name as many different things in a category as you can. Next week, it'll be against
Kasperi Kapanen and tickets to the Islanders game on February
There you go.
22nd.
So a Kasperi Kapanen signed puck on the line next week.
And shout out to our friends over at Comfort Experts for being a part of our Beat the Blues here weekly on BK and Ferrario.
Love doing this. It's a fun time every single week.
Still
All right.
respect to Tony for saying BK and Ferrario.
Coming up in about 15 minutes or so, we have an update on the story that we talked about yesterday for the show today. So we'll get into that coming up in about 15 minutes or so. But next, Jake Neighbours continues to exceed all expectations for the St. Louis Blues. What is his future outlook looking like at this point? We'll talk about it next here on 101 ESPN.
Terry Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Blues beat the Canucks last night in overtime. They'll be back in action tomorrow night as they visit the Seattle Kraken. We'll have pregame coverage starting at 8 o'clock with Alex Ferrario, and then Chris Kerber will have puck drop for you at 9 o'clock. This Sports Center update was driven by Johnny Londoff. Find the Road Shop 24/7 at londoff.com, londoffautoplex.com. Are you kidding me?
Thomas in the middle. Shoot! Score! Jake Neighbours finds the back of the net on a great feed from Robert Thomas.
That's what it sounded like last night. Jake Neighbours, another goal for him. And, man, he is putting up one heck of a season, especially for a 21-year-old player. If you look at it now, Jake Neighbours is second on the Blues in goals so far this year. He has 15 goals in 45 games. I never would have anticipated he would be second on this team in goals. I remember having the conversation last year, Alex. Can Jake Neighbours be a 20-goal scorer for the Blues? And I told you that's crazy. Now, I ended up being right about that, but I was also way too low this year. You were right on Jake Neighbours this year. You were just a year early on it. Jake Neighbours this season is now on pace for 27 goals on the season. Now, we got to get that assist number up. He's at 7, on pace for 7 this year, which would be 34 points. Like to see that a little bit higher, but we'll get there. Right now, he's about putting the puck in the back of the net, and this team desperately needed somebody that was capable of doing it. But, Alex, it's the way he's putting the puck in the back of the net that I think stands out most.
Absolutely. And you guys want to play a quick game real quick? Like, how many people does Jake Neighbours have more goals than? He's got more goals than Tage Thompson. He's got more goals than Mark Scheifele. He's got more goals than Claude Giroux. He's got more goals than Evgeny Malkin. He's got more goals than Quinn Hughes. I keep going down this list. He's got more goals than Connor Bedard. Some are saying around the National Hockey League, he's basically a better version of Connor Bedard. Throwing that one out there for you guys.
Most are not, though.
Most probably aren't, but they haven't heard me say that right there. So, but no, it is the way that he's doing. And we talked about this when he was going on that torrid pace. I guess it was back in late November, early December. And I remember us talking about how, like, he really is turning into a unicorn in the NHL of being purely a power forward. Like, Jake Neighbours is not a guy that's going to wow you with his strength of shot. He's not going to beat you with his deking skills one-on-one. He's going to beat you because he's going to outmuscle you in front of the net. And look at how he scored that goal last night. He went straight to the net, got the pass, and then made the quick shot. And then he made the pass to Pavel Buchnevich on the power play. Where? Right next to the crease. Jake Neighbours is that unicorn that is the power forward, pure power forward in the NHL. And there's not many of them. Like, there are certain guys. Valery Nichushkin is standing at 6'4". He's a power forward. BK's guy, Chris Kreider, he's a power forward. The tip king, I think he likes to call himself. Jake Neighbours is 21 years old. He's like 6'1", and he plays like a power forward. And frankly, it's something that the Blues desperately need. Craig Berube was clamoring for somebody to go to the front of the net back in November. Then Jake Neighbours went on like 8 goals in 11 games. And Jake Neighbours is now doing what Drew Bannister has been clamoring for, going to the front of the net. And it's no coincidence he's got points, I believe, in 4 straight games.
So as I look at what his future holds for the Blues, and I think about, okay, you got a 27-goal scorer for his age 21 season. That sounds like a top-line player. Like that, on most teams, they'd be looking at that and saying, okay, well, we've got a guy that can be in our top 6 for years to come. 21 years old, that's an unbelievable projection of what he could be down the road. And yet the Blues don't really use him that way. Jake Neighbours so far this season has spent a total of 14 minutes at 5-on-5 with Robert Thomas and Jordan Kyrou. In other words, those guys would be considered a top line together in just 14 minutes so far this year. Meanwhile, Jake Neighbours has spent 122 minutes with Robert Thomas without Jordan Kyrou. So Buchnevich, Thomas, Neighbours, that was the top line there for a little while. That was when they were going with Kyrou with Braden Shin. But they decided not to go about it that way any longer. Alex, I'd like to see them give it a try. And the reason why is because as I look at some of these legitimate contenders around the NHL, we're talking Dallas, Boston, Florida, New York, Toronto, Edmonton, Carolina, Winnipeg, Colorado, Vancouver. When you look at the way that their lines are constructed, for many of them, it is pairs and then a third guy that does what Jake Neighbours is doing. Like you look at Dallas, for example. Tyler Seguin and Matt Duchene are the pair. And then they've got Duchesne, And then they've got Mason Marchment as the third player on that line.
Power forward, by the way.
6'4", 220 pounds, go to the front of the net, score goals for us. He's been on like 3 different teams in the last 4 years. Mason Marchment, though, important piece for them, scoring goals for them. All right, Boston. Bet you they do it a little differently. No, not really. Got Brad Marchand, you got Charlie Coyle, you got Jake DeBrusk. That's their most used lineup combination so far this year. Jake DeBrusk is just Jake Neighbours on the Boston Bruins. Okay, so he's playing top line minutes. You look at Florida, their most used line combination so far this year. Reinhart Barkov and Evan Rodriguez. Well, Evan Rodriguez has been on like 3 different teams in the last 3 years, but kind of does some of the things that we're talking about here. He's a solid veteran presence on a line that could use it. And then you look at like the Toronto Maple Leafs, Tavares, Nylander, Bertuzzi. That guy's not a superstar player. Good player, like him, would like to have him on the Blues, but he's just a third piece in their line combinations. Edmonton as maybe the best example of this. McDavid, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, and Zach Hyman. Zach Hyman's a nice player. You'd like to have him. Is he a guy that anybody talks about whenever they're discussing Edmonton superstars? Of course not. He's not on the same level as their top 2 guys, but more often than not, he's playing with Connor McDavid because they need somebody with that skill set on that line. Alex, my pushback for breaking up the Booch, Thomas, and Kyrou line has been, well, but you don't have the depth of scoring elsewhere. Like, that's the line that's going to be here long term. Go ahead and let them play together. Well, I'm starting to be convinced that Jake Neighbours is a long-term top 6 forward for you. And if you do see it that way, we're getting to the point in time where it's worth finding out if he can be a combination with either Thomas and Buchnevich or Thomas and Kyrou.
And I think he is a top-line forward for you, and I think he might be more of a top-line forward than Jordan Kyrou. And I know that sounds outlandish to say, but to say that they with that top line being together, you know, that's how you get the most out of your scoring. When Thomas Buchnevich and Jake Neighbours were together for 11 games in mid-November to early December, all 3 of those guys were point-per-game player. And Jordan Kyrou had 8 points in 10 games, while Braden Shen was a point-per-game player. So when you had a combination of Booch, Thomas, Kyrou, or I'm sorry, Booch, Thomas, Neighbours, and then Kyrou and Shen, and I think it was Brandon Saad that was playing with them, those 6 players were creating a ton of offense, and you were winning hockey games. I just, the way I look at it is, coaches like to build lines with different roles. You like to have your passer, you like to have your goal scorer, and you like to have your net front presence. I think the successful teams have that net front presence in your top 6 of your top line, and Jake Neighbours is that guy. I don't think Kyrou's that guy. I don't think Pavel Buchnevich is that guy. Frankly, I also don't think you have any coming up. Maybe Stenberg can be, but I don't think he's a top 6 winger. Snuggerud's going to be your goal scorer, and Dvorsky's going to be a passer. You need a net front presence. And Jake Neighbours is a guy like a Zach Hyman, like a Michael Bunting with the Carolina Hurricanes, like a Valerie Nichushkin with the Colorado Avalanche. And you mentioned there, you know, you want to see the assist numbers get up. Frankly, I don't care.
I was mostly just joking.
I understand, because we say it with Brandon Saad all the time. Like, we're being facetious with it. But
I want him to pass. Dang it.
I think the only reason he doesn't pass is because he's got a mindset where he shoots first. Frankly, I would love to see Robert Thomas have 80 assists in a season and Jake Neighbours have 30 goals in a season, because that, to me, is a scary good line. I know you don't want to break them up because you're winning games right now, and Braden Shen's playing well because of Jake Neighbours. Man, the way I look at this is I think Jake Neighbours deserves more top-line opportunities, and I think he, with a Thomas and Buchnevich, is the prototypical line that hockey teams want in the NHL.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. From the 636, guys, are you willing to admit how wrong you were about Jake Neighbours? Because in the preseason, you were talking about how his ceiling is a third-line player with 20 goals per season. I feel like that's exactly what I'm doing here. Maybe I'm not doing it well, but yes, of course I'm willing to admit that I was wrong. I'm wrong on players all the time. I hope that these guys outperform what our expectations are for them, because that means, first of all, they have raised their game to a level that we didn't foresee, which is awesome. And 2, it means that the Blues are going to be better than we thought they were going to be, quicker than we thought they were going to be, which, again, is great. That's really good for us as a station because we're the home of the Blues. We want the Blues to win. It's better for us personally and professionally because I like watching winning hockey, and professionally because you guys are more interested in listening to talk about hockey when the Blues do well. So, yes, of course I'm willing to admit that I was wrong on Jake Neighbours. I was incredibly wrong on Jake Neighbours based on his performance so far this season. The guy's on pace for nearly 30 goals. if you thought that was likely to happen this year, man, kudos to you. You should probably go out and get a lottery ticket because that was roughly the equivalent in terms of the odds of that happening. I would bet if we looked at an over-under on his goal-scoring production this year in like a Vegas type of projection, Alex, it's probably like 12.5. And that would have been a good season by Jake Neighbours. I think we all would have been happy if he finished the year with like 15 goals, if that's where he finished this year. Instead, he is there and we are halfway through the year. That is a remarkable way to go about things if you're Neighbours. He is earning opportunities on the power play. He, in my opinion, has earned a bump up in the lineup to potentially even the first line. Alex, they came into the season with this guy being below Sammy Blais in their lineup. The Blues didn't know how good Jake Neighbours was going to be this year. Yeah. This isn't an outside of the loop type of a The Blues didn't see this coming. Otherwise, he would have been in the top 9 on opening night, and Sammy Blais would have been on your 4th line. So this is a credit to the kid for being everything the Blues could have asked for and then some. Yeah. He has so far exceeded expectations this year, and it's opening up the eyes of us here in St. Louis, and very soon it should open up the eyes of people around the NHL for the way that he's playing.
Real quick, somebody texted in on our Air Comfort Service text line saying, like, guys, Kyrou can't play with Schenn. He doesn't match well with that player. He has to be with Thomas. I disagree. I think if you look at Kyrou's numbers when he's played with Schenn and when Schenn's played with Kyrou, both players have had success. Like, over the last 3 years, they've had a Corsi rating of 46% and expected goals around like 40 in a matter of 182 games. You look at what he and Robert Thomas have done together, it's not that very dissimilar. Their Corsi ratings at 50% and an expected goals sitting at around 52 total. Like, I think Kyrou is a guy that benefits from somebody who can get him the puck, and Braden Schenn is showcasing that ability just like Robert Thomas is. Now, Thomas is elite at it, but I always think that Robert Thomas benefits from having somebody where you know he is every single time, because when you have elite passers, you want to know where guys are going to be before they are there. And when you got a power forward on your team, guess what? I know where he's going to be. He's going to be right in front of the net where I put the puck.
And the interesting thing is I would go the opposite way. I would go Kyrou continuing to play with Robert Thomas, because I do think they are the best pairing. And then you have Neighbours, who is that predictable player that you're talking about with Thomas. And then I would go Buchnevich on that second line with Schenn and Saad. I would go with those three playing together as kind of the quote-unquote shutdown line, and then that top line being my scoring.
I just feel like when my top line's on the ice, I need predictability, and I don't know if I have that with Kyrou, where I watch the McKinnon line, I watch McDavid play. Those three guys, when they're on the ice, their lines, it's predictability. Like, every single person knows where the other guy is going, and I'm not sure you have that with Kyrou at times.
I think some of that is good, though, sometimes. I think it can be a problem for them, no doubt about it. We've seen that a lot this year. Mm-hmm. But I think sometimes they play jazz out there, and that means not having predictability. Whereas, like, Braden Schenn, Pavel Buchnevich, and Brandon Saad can go out there and be a pianist, if you will. Like, they play different music, but it ends up being beautiful when it's composed correctly, right?
Did you just make a Michael Scott reference with me? It's beautiful.
That's the way that they go about it differently, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But I would just like to see Jake Neighbours thrown into the band with that top line. That would be the way that I would go about it. I understand why they're doing it this way. They're slow playing it. Get his feet wet. Allow him to continue to succeed. Experience that at the NHL level. There's nothing wrong with that either. But, hey, man, at some point, if he's going to be on that top line, let's go ahead and see it. He's earning those opportunities. Coming up in about 15 minutes or so, who is the NFL person, player, coach, etc., with the most to prove going into this weekend? I think we all have different answers to that question. We'll get into that coming up at the top of the hour. But next, it's time for the junk drawer here on 101 ESPN. Alongside Alex and T-Bone on BK, you got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. So we got an update to the story we discussed yesterday, Alex, about the 3 dead Chiefs fans of Kansas City.
Is this what you were talking about?
T-Bone and I were trying to figure out what story we talked about yesterday because we don't listen to you.
I know we didn't talk about Jake Neighbours yesterday.
No.
I thought we were talking about something else.
No, we got an update on the story about the 3 Chiefs fans that are dead in a backyard in Kansas City. If you don't remember it, or if you weren't tuning in yesterday, there was a story in Kansas City from Chiefs versus Chargers. This was early January. It was cold in Kansas City. 3 individuals went over to their buddy's house in KC and lost all contact with their family for a couple of days. And then one of their wives came over, pounding on the front door.
Still suspect number 1 for me.
They see a gentleman who lives at this house passed out on the couch.
That's suspect number 1 for me.
That's suspect number 2. The wife being 2 days without wondering where her husband is.
They eventually, that the wife, breaks into the house because she can't wake him up.
Breaking and entering.
And sees the individuals in the backyard, what she thought was asleep. They were dead.
The man-sickles.
And the guy was just sleeping there, laying on the couch. He fell asleep apparently for 2 days. Well, there's an update. Alex, this comes from his attorney.
Oh, of course it does. This will be gold.
Quote, he was asleep. He was asleep on the couch. The last memory that he has is them leaving out the front door. He doesn't know what happened with them until, when the police came Tuesday night to his house.
Weren't they in the backyard? So they walked out the front door and then they went to the backyard to decide to keep drinking?
The attorney added that Kansas City investigators have said that there was no foul play and they were not investigating his client in connection with the bizarre and inexplicable deaths. Quote, they said there's no foul play. They don't suspect it. It's not being treated as a homicide investigation.
So many loopholes in this. Nobody sleeps for 2 days and just wakes up.
Dude.
Don't understand how they went out the front door if they're in the backyard. And why is the wife breaking into the house?
Well, because you got to get in, man. You got to find out if your husband's
2
there.
days later, huh? 2 days
if
later.
Your wife had no contact with you for 2 days.
She would have been trying to get there 2 days earlier.
You know what? That's fair.
And why are we going outside
Maybe
to watch the Chiefs game?
Relationship, We don't know.
Why are we going outside to watch the Chiefs game? And don't give me the baloney. They wanted the atmosphere of being there.
Even when it's cold outside, though, like a nice fire.
A nice fire is not going to do anything when it's minus 10 degrees outside.
Yeah, that's fair, but, it's a little bit better.
Yeah, there was some kind of... I know they're not investigating this as a homicide. That's fine. Them saying they don't suspect foul play, that's nonsense. I want to hear something going on.
I want to hear the autopsy first, because then you make sure that there was nothing in the system. And then once you find that out, then you start investigating the individual.
There's going to be a 2020 on this.
Oh, yeah. I think it's going to be a Netflix documentary.
For sure.
Yeah. I think as soon as they start to get more answers about this feels a lot like what that Idaho case was with the college students.
You were all in on that.
Oh, man, I was so obsessed with that. Now it's kind of hit that dead spell where, you don't really know. Bad choice of words by me. Sorry, guys. But
what the heck?
That feels like this. It's going to start as nothing where it's like, boy, well, this is just really odd. And then it's, oh, okay, this random dude was circling this college house for a really long time. You're going to find out some mysterious person involved with it and be like, huh, this is a little odd. And the next thing you know, boom, murders.
Did you get into the Murdaugh investigations?
Oh, yeah.
Were you
See, I didn't
know anything about it until I watched the first documentary, and then I got into that deep dive. Oh yeah, these people are sketchy as you know what.
You guys really get locked into this. I have no interest in this stuff.
So my wife is very much into the true crime stuff, and so I get pulled in.
Love it.
So, would I click on it on Netflix or Hulu or whatever? Maybe not. But once I'm in, dude, I'm dialed in.
Oh, yeah.
My biggest problem, though, is the unsolved mysteries that you love. I can't do them.
See, I love that. That's the best part.
I enjoy them until we get to the end and realize this is still unsolved. It's like, hey, if you have any tips, call X, Y, and Z.
What's wild about it is, so my wife loves them, too. We watch them a lot. But when I come home at 1 o'clock at night, and, she's by herself at home watching, these true crime stuff of, the wife that gets murdered in the house, I'm like, why are you watching this when you're home alone? She likes it. And I said, that's kind of creepy, but let's watch it together next time.
Yeah. Are you guys 2020?
Yeah, watch 2020. Yeah, the other one is the one that's coming out this Friday. That Gypsy Rose Blanchard. Did you watch this story? The girl that it was that Munchausen by proxy where she killed her mom or had somebody kill her mom. She was in jail. Now she's out. And she is uber popular. And she still, had somebody kill her mom. freaking crazy. So for 2020 on Friday.
But also kind of makes sense if you watch
it
the
makes
story.
total sense. I would do it, but I also don't think I'd be out of jail by now, where the dude is still in prison for the rest of his life.
Yeah, tough go of it. All right, coming up in about 15 minutes or so, it's T-Bone's favorite segment of the week. It's Believe It or Not. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. If you have a scenario, we will tell you if we are believing it or not, coming up at 1:15. Coming up next, though, who has the most to prove this weekend in the NFL? We'll give you our answers here on 101 ESPN. Alongside Alex and T-Bone on BK, you got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. You know that sound means it is time to talk about the NFL. And Alex, heading into this weekend, there are a lot of individuals with some pressure to prove something to NFL fans that they can overcome what they've had in the past. And Alex, over on Yahoo Sports, they had a list of the players, the people with the most to prove this weekend. At number 1 on this list, they had Kyle Shanahan. Number 2, and we continue from there, Lamar Jackson. Number 3 was Jared Goff. Brock Purdy came in at number 4, fourth most approved this weekend. And at number 5, I don't really know the rationale for this. They have Patrick Mahomes.
Of course you don't know the rationale.
Most to prove in the NFL this weekend. Alex, when you think about the person for you that has the most to prove with a win in championship weekend to get to a Super Bowl, who would you have atop that list?
Lamar Jackson.
I would too.
I don't understand Kyle Shanahan. So, and my mindset behind this doesn't back up the Lamar Jackson side of it, but when somebody's got something to prove, it's if you don't do well here, you're going to lose your job. And Lamar's not losing his job, but I don't think Kyle Shanahan's losing his job. So in the sense that I just said, I'd probably put Jared Goff there, because if you're Detroit and you can't get that next step, do you look at, well, we got to get a better quarterback. But with Lamar Jackson, he's going to win the MVP. And Lamar Jackson just accomplished something last weekend that I wasn't sure he was able to do in terms of winning to get into the next round of the playoffs. But I still think he's got the most to prove because everybody is talking about Lamar Jackson being the big thing in the AFC. He's the MVP. And if you go out there and lay an egg against a Kansas City Chiefs team that you should go out there and beat, especially you should be the better offense against them, I think you're walking out of there saying, cool, Lamar Jackson, regular season guy, not a postseason guy. So I'd put him and I'd put Jared Goff before I'd even say Kyle Shanahan's name.
See, it's weird because I don't know if there's much for Lamar to prove for me this weekend because if he plays absolutely terrible, sure, then I'm going to look back on it. But if he plays well and they still end up losing, I don't have anything that Lamar has to prove to me because I think the issue with the Ravens is it's the cast around him for Lamar.
How many times can we say that, though?
Yeah.
I think we can continue to say it until I think the cast around him is actually good.
Is his cast, if Mark Andrews is healthy, is his cast worse than Patrick Mahomes' cast?
No, I would say he's got a better cast.
No, but I think Andrews has already been ruled out, if I'm not mistaken, right?
He's expected to play.
But even without Andrews, I would still say they've got a better cast behind Lamar Jackson than Patrick Mahomes.
I don't know that I would go there. I mean, if you don't have Mark Andrews, then you don't
but
have
Isaiah
anybody that's in that
Likely is
Travis
proven to be somebody that can get the job done. You've also got Zay Flowers, and I know OBJ goes in and out, but it's still a better weapon than you could bring up.
Zay Flowers is their Rashee Rice, and Mark Andrews is their Travis Kelce. So if Mark Andrews plays, I think it's better than what the Chiefs have as weapons. If he does not, I could see how it's not. I don't think their weapons are as good as people have cracked them up to be. So I'm with you there, T-Bone. But he's the MVP, man. Like, you were able to get things done with these guys around you as the MVP of the NFL all regular season. I love Lamar Jackson. I think Lamar is a top 5 quarterback in the league. I do need to see it in the playoffs, man. Yeah. I do.
And you're paying them all that money, which means you can't afford to buy all of these weapons that you want with Lamar Jackson.
2018 postseason, you go to the playoffs. They lose 23-17 against the Chargers. 2019, you go back to the playoffs. They lose 28-12 against the Tennessee Titans. The next year, you go back to the playoffs again. You get a win, but it's only 20-13 against a bad Tennessee Titans team next week. You lose against the Buffalo Bills, and you do so to the tune of a 17-3 loss. Now you're back again. Last year they made it, but he didn't play because he was hurt. This year you're back again. You just had an awesome game. I mean, he was great against a horrible Houston Texans defense. Now's your chance. Now's your chance to show you didn't get it done against Buffalo, a solid defense. You didn't get it done against the Titans, a fine defense. Didn't get it done against the Chargers, an okay defense. Can you do it when the stakes are the highest against a legit defensive opponent? I want to see it. Because so far, the answer has been a resounding no. And are there excuses, explanations, whatever you want to call them? Sure there are. There are excuses or explanations for every team, every single season that don't make it to the Super Bowl. And many of them are legitimate. Injuries, didn't have the right supporting cast, offensive line wasn't good enough. Sure, you're Lamar. You're a 2-time MVP. You're a future Hall of Fame quarterback, in my opinion. If you are the guy that we all think you are, you should be able to overcome that. And I'm not telling you got to go out there and put 30 up against the Chiefs. You got to put up a pretty representative appearance, though. So to me, he is the most to prove. Finally doing it in the playoffs means you are on the Mount Rushmore of current quarterbacks in the NFL, and there's no way for anybody to take you off of it. If you don't, there's going to continue to be questions of whether or not he can get it done in the playoffs.
And the best part about it for Lamar Jackson is you don't have to be the best portion of the game on the field. Like, he's got a defense that's elite behind him, so we just need you to be able to make the passes that we need you. Like, what I'm saying is he doesn't have to be the only guy that gets the job done. His defense can carry the team, and Lamar Jackson comes through in a couple of big moments, and you say, damn, he got the job done, and the defense backed him up.
Yeah, I guess I just still look at it as like I think the cast he has around him, and I'm throwing the running back into the conversation as well for the pieces around him. I think it's worse than what Mahomes has, even with Andrews playing.
Man,
because I don't think he has a good running game, and I think that changes everything.
But I don't think he needs a good running game because he's the running back.
Maybe.
I also think we're underestimated. Like, their running backs are fine. They're not great, but they're fine. Isaiah Pacheco is fine. I like Isaiah Pacheco. He runs really hard, but is he all that different than Gus Edwards and Justice Hill?
I think he's better than those guys, and I don't even think it's close.
But that's the other thing, too.
I totally disagree. Isaiah Pacheco doesn't have very good vision, man. He gets what's blocked for him, and he runs really hard. He tries so incredibly hard. But that's really his value.
Yeah, and they do it by committee also. Like, they don't use just one guy solely. Like, Kansas City just uses Isaiah Pacheco, and they'll use Justice Hill and Gus Edwards. And again, I don't think you need a great running game because they know Lamar Jackson's going to do most of the running anyway.
T-Bone, who is your guy with the most to prove going into this weekend?
For me, and I've been on this train in the playoffs, it's Brock Purdy. That surrounding cast, Like, as much as we talk about where I don't think Lamar has a surrounding cast, Brock Purdy has a surrounding cast where if he's just average, they can go win a freaking Super Bowl. And he was terrible last weekend. I think he has the most to prove because even if Debo does not play, and he was getting work, I think I saw a report yesterday, he was working, so I think he's probably going to play. But if he doesn't, there's still enough weapons for Brock Purdy to at least go out there and prove, hey, I may not be a top 10 quarterback, but I can go win a freaking Super Bowl with the roster that's around me. I feel like he's got the most to prove this weekend because there's no excuse for the 49ers to lose, A, this weekend because the Lions don't have a secondary, and B, they have the best all-around roster in football. There's no excuse for them not to win a Super Bowl. That's why I would go like Purdy 1, and then I would put Kyle Shanahan at number 2.
See, I just feel like if the 49ers lose, I'm not going to walk out of that and say, well, you need to get a better quarterback because you can't afford a better quarterback. Like, they've got to play this way because they've got all of the cast around him to be the difference maker in that game. Like, if they lose, I'm going to say, okay, well, Deebo Samuel didn't get the job done or he wasn't healthy for you. Christian McCaffrey wasn't as great as he was supposed to be, or your defense didn't win that game. Like, I think I walk out of that game if San Francisco loses and say, yeah, Brock Purdy wasn't the guy, but I've kind of already questioned that.
Yeah, I don't know that Brock Purdy can prove anything. I think that's the tough part with me saying he's the guy with the most to prove is, okay, so let's say they win. We're going to give credit to Purdy? If they lose, we'll certainly criticize him. We know that, but we'll also criticize Kyle Shanahan. But if they win, the credit's not going to Brock Purdy. The credit already isn't going to Brock Purdy. The guy, all he has done since taking over as the quarterback for the 49ers is basically be a guy that has proven he's capable of leading them to the NFC Championship game in back-to-back years. And if he didn't get hurt last year, they had a real chance to get to the Super Bowl with him as their starting quarterback. I think they should get to the Super Bowl this year. I think he's good enough. I think they are the better team heading into Sunday's game against the Detroit Lions. T-Bone, if he wins, though, if they put up 27 points and it's similar to what we've seen all year, right? There's not a totally different version of Brock Purdy. Do you think he's going to be the one that we leave saying, oh, damn, yeah, Brock Purdy can get it done. He's the guy. He proved to me everything that I needed to see. Do you think he can do that against the Lions? I think he has to do that against in the Super Bowl against either the Chiefs or the Ravens defenses. I don't think there's anything he can prove against this Detroit Lions defense that Baker Mayfield just threw for 350 against last week.
That's probably fair, is that it probably needs to get to the Super Bowl before you get to that point. But I think it's more of, okay, you feel a little bit more comfortable with him after this weekend, and then he really proves it in the Super Bowl. But I think he's the kind of guy that sinks the ship of the San Francisco 49ers. You know, he's the hole that can potentially put them from being a Super Bowl contender to just sinking them completely and not even getting to the big dance. So that's why I think, whether you want to call it most approved or under most pressure, I would put Brock Purdy in that category.
See, but is there pressure if you're not going to get replaced?
Well,
I think there's a 0% chance that they move on from him.
I think I'm more frustrated with the front office putting the team in that position where they have to rely on Brock Purdy than I am with Brock Purdy.
Like, this is the thing that I find to be a little frustrating is, like, he makes no money, and that's why they have the supporting cast that they do, is because he makes no money. And so you're able to go out and trade for Chase Young at the trade deadline, and you can make it work money-wise. And you can have Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk and Christian McCaffrey and a stud left tackle and a great defense that you're paying all these guys.
But you also drafted Trey Lance in hopes that they wouldn't have to worry about. Yeah, that's what I mean by that. Like, you backed the wrong horse in this, which puts you in this position to use Brock Purdy.
Yeah, I guess where I come from is, sure, maybe he doesn't get replaced, but I think that's a bad job by the 49ers front office then if they can't figure a way to wiggle out of the cap situation and go get a quarterback if Purdy's not the guy. Because otherwise, what do you do? You're just wasting this roster. And maybe it does mean you have to move on from one piece of it. But can I bring in a quarterback that then is more stable than Purdy and then can lift the rest of that roster up? Because I don't think Purdy lifts up the roster. I think the roster lifts up Brock Purdy.
I totally agree.
And that's where I come on this with the Brock Purdy situation is if Brock Purdy cannot prove to be the guy, and he's like a 20 to 32 range quarterback in the NFL, you got to go find a replacement for him. Because otherwise you just wait. I think so. Otherwise you just wasted this roster. Because this roster is great, but if right now we pluck out one piece Deebo Samuel, Brock Purdy and this whole offense goes crumbling down to where they almost lost last weekend to the Green Bay freaking Packers. Yep. And yeah, the Packers played well, but if I'm saying I can replace the quarterback while pluck into Deebo Samuel, can that quarterback play up to the level that we need for him to go win a Super Bowl? I think he could.
Is they have no ability to move on from guys on their roster right now. Like, they can't cut Trent Williams, Deebo Samuel, Eric Armstead, Fred Warner, George Kittle, Charvarius Ward, Javon Hargrave, Nick Bosa. None of those guys can be cut this offseason.
That's why Brock's got to be the guy.
And so they have to run it back with Brock Purdy because they also have negative $2 million in cap space heading into the offseason. So you can't go get, they don't have the ability to go sign Kirk Cousins this offseason. If you see that story anywhere, just ignore it because they literally cannot make that work money-wise for this upcoming year. So they have to get it right with Brock Purdy. And it's why I think there are zero stakes for him. Yeah. Zero. They're not moving on from him this offseason. He can't prove anything to me, at least, against the Detroit Lions secondary that just gave up $350 to Baker, Bleep, and Mayfield. I need to see it in the Super Bowl. That's where I need to see it. I need to see him win this week and then do it against either the Ravens or the Chiefs. And in that scenario, now we can have a conversation. If you had to rank your quarterbacks today, Alex and T-Bone, in terms of 1 to 4, the 4 quarterbacks that are going to be playing this weekend and the 4 quarterbacks that you trust the most heading into this weekend, how would you rank them?
Mahomes, Jackson, Goff, Purdy.
That's my list. Mahomes won. I mean, he's been fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
I trust Lamar more than I trust Goff because I think San Francisco is going to dial up the blitz, and when there's the blitz, Goff is tough. And I trust Purdy the least by far.
What's wild about it is depending on how the weekend goes, and if it goes the way I think it will, where Detroit does win, I could flip Jared Goff and Lamar Jackson after that game.
Oh, wow.
Because I think if they lose, Lamar Jackson's going to be the reason Baltimore loses.
I would say the same is true for Detroit, though.
Agreed, but if Baltimore loses and Detroit wins, I could look at that and say, well, they got a quarterback that get the job done, and Lamar has not been able to do that.
That's a fair way to look at it. Yeah, I would say that's the right way to go about it. I think there are some that have Mahomes lower on that list than what we would anticipate, which is just
look, I hate
crazy.
I hate the Kansas City Chiefs honks, but anybody who's going to do that just doesn't watch games.
He's Alex, that's T-Bone, I'm BK. A couple of really good games on Sunday. We'll certainly be breaking them down tomorrow at length as well. Coming up next, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Believe It or Not here on 101 ESPN.
Oh, sing it,
Try to
boys.
remember the damn lyrics this time,
Don't
T-Bone.
put pressure on me. Believe it or not, I'm walking on air. I never thought I could feel so
Free, flying away on a wing and a prayer. Who could it be?
Believe it or not, it's just me.
314-399-9646 is the Air
said the
Comfort
right
Service text
words.
line for Believe It or Not. You give us a scenario, we will tell you if we are believing it or not here on BK and Ferrario. Alex, let's start with this. Believe it or not, Jake Neighbours will finish the season with 30 goals for the Blues. He has 15 currently. He is on pace as of today for 27.
Yeah, I'm going to not believe this one because that's a tough thing to achieve. And
that's a lot of goals.
It's a lot of goals. And I also think you got to go on like a consistent, you've got to stay consistently on the score sheet to get there. And he has been in and out of games. So unless they put him in an ideal situation, I'm going to say not believe this one, but I do think he gets to 25 this season.
What was the number you said
30.
again? 30? Yeah, that's a lot of goals. I'm not going to believe that because I think he rides kind of in his first full year here, too, where he really rides the waves of there's going to be like a 6-game stretch where he scores 4 goals, and there's going to be a 15-game stretch where he scores like 2. So I'm not going to believe it. I don't think he'll get to 30. I just can't see that happening.
I'm going to go ahead and believe it. I think eventually he's going to get an opportunity with Robert Thomas. And if he does, I think you'll see him putting up big-time numbers for the St. Louis Blues because he's just going to stand in front of the net. You're going to get opportunities there, and Robert Thomas will find him better than anybody else on this team can. No shot against anybody else. Robert Thomas just a really good distributor of the puck. So I'm going to say believe it. I think he finishes with 30 goals this season. I'm feeling a little optimistic today. Alex, what do you got?
Guys, believe it or not, now I'm not saying he should, but believe it or not, Colton Parayko should at least start to get to considerations of Norris Trophy.
No.
Hear me out. It's nothing to do with points and everything to do with the defensive play. Although points, by the way, he's only 5 shy of the most goals by a defenseman right now in the National Hockey League. So
only 5 goals?
Yeah, 5 goals. He's got 8. So but I looked
like a lot.
Listen to this last night. We were talking about this on postgame. So he played almost 27 minutes with 6 blocked shots against Vancouver. And that's following a game where he played 25 minutes and 17 seconds against Calgary. So back-to-back nights, he played 25 minutes or more. Both games, he led the team in ice time. When Parayko leads the team in ice time this season, the Blues are 12-2-2. And he is shutting down the other team's top line. In those 2 games, the top line had 2 points.
You're not going to like what I'm about to say, but I think that's a correlation versus causation thing where when the Blues are up late, they want Parayko on the ice because that would be an opportunity for them to play defense well.
Hence the 10-1-2 and 1-goal victories.
Right. But what I'm saying is you play him more in the third period when the other team is like really trying to put pressure on you offensively.
Play your best defenseman out there.
Correct. And so that would lead to you winning more games because you're playing from ahead. Whereas when he's not on the ice more, that's because they're wanting to get like Krug and Falk out there because they're trying to go play offense.
Start putting his damn name in the Norris Trophy conversation. I don't need your causation versus correlation. Colton Parayko is one of the top defensemen this season in the NHL.
But
not believe it.
All right,
I'm just going to
ask, based on what?
What do you mean, based on what?
What is the...
Because I said so. That's what. Because he actually plays defense as opposed to the Erik Karlssons or the Cale Makars. Cale Makars actually.
Do you know where he ranks this year among defensemen in time on ice per game?
Should be.
Because that was the evidence that we used.
It should be top 15.
25th. 25th.
Isolated a little bit more with like more than 30 games played.
25th.
No.
That's literally among all defensemen that have played at least 35 games so far this year.
No.
Not believe it.
Cool. Keep up with your stupid ideas and your thought process. He's a top defenseman.
Quit using numbers, you nerd.
Which site did you decide to use today? Was it Natural Statric or Money Puck? Because the other one doesn't matter.
NHL.com.
I hate that one.
That's a false.
Where do you think he ranks among NHL defensemen in plus minus? So
I know
this
that's
year?
not good, but that's more of the team in front of him.
Yeah, that's gotta be
60th.
Yeah, that's more team in front of him.
I just don't know what I'm supposed to use to support the evidence that he should be a Norris Trophy candidate.
Use your eye.
Use your damn eye. Yeah.
I'm not going to pretend like I'm watching all of these other defensemen, but they seem to have a lot better numbers than Colton Parayko so far. Like, Quinn Hughes is a plus 35. What am I supposed to do to knock that number? Plus 35
That's not the best defenseman,
games?
though. That's not the best defenseman. That's just the best offensive defenseman.
He's put up 60 points in 48 games. That also seems really good. If you're putting up a ton of points while he's on the ice, I feel like that means the other team's not scoring as much. So,
it's trash take, bro.
I would go with him, personally.
Yeah, you're a clown, bro.
Believe it or not, the St. Louis Blues will add a top 9 forward at the trade deadline that has control.
Ooh. I'm going to say 9.
Not. Yeah.
I'm going to say not, but I like where your head's at.
I'll say believe it because I think you could acquire. Like, do you mean control where he's already under contract, or like he's the Blues property?
However you want to do it, whether he's an RFA or he's under contract.
I think they could acquire somebody who is an RFA. Like that Nick Robertson we talked about yesterday from the Toronto Maple Leafs. That's somebody that I could see the Blues trying to make a push for, trading a Marco Scandella for a Nick Robertson, and he's a restricted free agent, so you've got control. That would be the one thing that I could see him, Doug Armstrong, pull off. Is making a trade with a position player for another position player that's fallen out of grace on that team. So I'll say believe it.
I would believe if they're still in it. I would believe it. I think he may sell off a Scandella still because I think though yes, it's nice getting to the playoffs, I think he knows they're not doing anything meaningful. And if that's the case, just free up a spot for a Perunovic or Kessel just to get the playoff experience. You get that 3rd-round pick for Scandella. Maybe you flip that 3rd-round pick for a guy that's fallen out of favor, and you bring in somebody. Or maybe it's not even a trade. Maybe it's another waiver pickup. I mean, he did that with Kapanen last year. Yeah. Kapanen was not a trade. They got him in a waiver pickup. They actually traded for Vrana. So I would believe this. I think he's going to look for another project, bring him in, see if he fits here in St. Louis, and you hope that you get better results on this investment than he did in the Kapanen and Vrana one.
I like it. I hope you're right. I would love to see something like that, especially if it's like an entry-level deal that they could just build around for the next few seasons, try to buy low. We talked about some of those ideas yesterday, Alex. I like the thought process, if nothing else. All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line for Believe It or Not. Alex, believe it or not, the Lions have already exceeded expectations, and no matter what happens on Sunday, this season was already a massive success for them.
I'd say believe that one. I mean, obviously, your goal is to be in the Super Bowl, especially with all of your weapons and potentially win one. But I also think, like, look how many guys they just drafted in the 1st round that are impacting this team now. I still think you're really young, and you've got the right head coach. So being able to make the playoffs for the first time since, the 90s, and then advance in the playoffs, yeah, I'd say this is a successful season.
Yeah, I believe it, because I think the 2 goals for them coming into the year were 1, win the North, and 2, win a playoff game. And they got them both. I think they're ahead of schedule. I think they were 2 years coming into the year. I thought they were 2 years away from being a true contender. And now I believe like next year they can be if they upgrade the secondary. So I'd say they're ahead of schedule in their rebuild, retool, whatever you want to call it.
The tough thing with this, man, is it never goes the way that we expect it to. I mean, you remember what it was like with the Rams when they had Todd Gurley and Jared Goff. Is like, man, this is going to be beautiful. And then they had to like completely overhaul the roster to be able to make their Super Bowl run. We remember what it was like for the Eagles when Carson Wentz was the starting quarterback for them, and then it all went sideways. We thought that was like the best roster in the NFL, and it was going to be them holding on to the East for years to come. It never worked that way. The Packers, when Aaron Rodgers became their starter, I thought, oh, this is a multi-time Super Bowl winner. They won 1. They went to 1 with him as their starting quarterback. So the reason why I bring that up is because, yes, I do think this year is absolutely a massive success, and no matter what happens on Sunday, you have already exceeded expectations. This is it, though. Now the expectations are there. Now you are held to the standard of you better win your division and you better get a step further. Now it's about getting greedy. And here's the problem. Ben Johnson's probably taking a head coaching job elsewhere. And now you've got the disease of more with guys that are already on your roster wanting more money, more opportunities. That stuff gets hard. It's the easiest part is to get here. It's not easy, but it's the easiest part. The hardest part is to break through and then get to the Super Bowl. There are so many teams that have come close and just never get there, and they keep banging on that glass ceiling. So, yeah, it's a successful season. No doubt about it. Nobody should be complaining about them getting here and losing on Sunday if that's how it goes. But the next part's really hard. And the next part is when it goes from the lovable Lions to, They just can't seem to get the job done in the playoffs. That will be what comes their way if they don't get it done sooner rather than later. All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. A couple more of these really quickly for Believe It or Not. Guys, believe it or not, Keyshawn, J. Will, and Max in the Morning got canceled because they tried to steal your Believe It or Not segment.
100%.
They tried to steal a couple of our segments. I've heard.
Yeah, ESPN heard. We called. We said, hey.
Yeah. Cease and desist.
We go or they go? And they said, all right, we'll get rid of them. Yeah. I said, thank you.
Yeah. I mean, you have some creativity with your stuff, and they just steal from us.
Believe it or not, guys, the coach that the Carolina Panthers just hired today will be fired by this time next year.
Oh, they can't do it again, surely.
Yeah, you're hiring him, so he's here. You're like, hey, you're our whipping boy for the next 3 years.
I hope that when they hired him, they know, like, hey, this guy's probably going to fail for the first 2 years, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, they knew. That's why they hired him.
Yeah.
Who's the least guy that's going to get the most pushback when we hire him? Let's go with this guy.
Yeah, that half of our fan base has never heard of. By the way, it sounds like all the Buccaneers reporters seem to think that this guy is a pretty good leader. And
hold on. The people covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers thought that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offensive coordinator was a good leader for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers?
That's not always the case. I've been around teams where I can tell you, don't hire this guy. He's getting buzz. Don't hire this guy. Put it that way.
Can we say a name? Or
coming up in about 15 minutes or so, we're getting into the BK and Ferrario Rewind. I'll just put it this way. I wouldn't have hired Matt House as my linebackers coach if I was the Jaguars. Coming up next, though, Lars Nootbaar, top 10 left fielder in the MLB. We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN.
Tara Hendricks here with a Sports Center update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. The Blues beat the Vancouver Canucks last night in overtime. They'll be back in action tomorrow night as they visit the Seattle Kraken. We'll have pregame coverage starting at 8 o'clock with Alex Ferrario, and then puck drop at 9 o'clock with the voice of the Blues, Chris Kerber. This Sports Update was brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Stater heating and air conditioning dealer.
MLB Network is doing their Top 10 Right Now series for each position in the major leagues. And Alex, tonight is center fielders. I do not think that the Cardinals will have anybody represented there. Next week, they're going to be doing the third baseman. I would imagine that Nolan Arenado will be somewhere on that list among the top 10.
Number 1!
But the other day, they did their top 10 left fielders in Major League Baseball. At number 1, they had Yordan Alvarez. They also had Chas McCormick at number 5, which was interesting to me considering they already had another Houston left fielder, but neither here nor there. Brandon Nimmo, who no Cardinals fans wanted last year, was at number 2. Nolan Jones at number 3, who I would assume most casual baseball fans aren't familiar with.
That's not a real person.
Brian Reynolds, who every Cardinals fan wanted last year, is at number 4. Randy Arozarena, no recollection of that player.
Yeah, who?
Coming in at number 6. And at number 7 among the top 10 left fielders in Major League Baseball, they have Lars Nootbaar of the St. Louis Cardinals. Alex, this is the latest in a long line of players for St. Louis that have made the list of top 10. Wilson Contreras was at number 6 among the top 10 catchers in Major League Baseball. Paul Goldschmidt was at number 4 among the top 10 first basemen in Major League Baseball as well. Sonny Gray, by the way, was number 10 among the top 10 starting pitchers in the sport. Alex, when you think about what the outfield could be for the Cardinals this year, I saw a projection the other day that had the Cardinals as a top 5 outfield when it comes to production in Major League Baseball. What do you think is the ceiling for this group? When you think about what you could get out of Nootbaar, Walker, and probably Tommy Edman.
I think your ceiling is looking at one of the better offenses in terms of outfield production in the National League or Major League Baseball. I don't think you're winning any Gold Gloves this year, and I probably would assume a lot of people don't see that happening. But I think when you talk about a Lars Nootbaar, who I agree with being in that top 10 conversation with Jordan Walker and with Tommy Edman, I think 2 of those 3, you're talking about guys who could put together 20 to 25, 30 home runs between Walker and Lars Nootbaar. And I think you're talking about a lot of offense coming from those guys. Like that list and this outfield backs what we talked about, saying that the identity of this team is your offense. And a lot of that offense production is going to come from a Lars Nootbaar, who more than likely is going to be a leadoff hitter for you, and Jordan Walker, who is going to be one of those clutch hitters for you. So I would hope that if things go the way that the Cardinals believe they will, you're going to have an outfield that a lot of teams desire going into next season.
Yeah, I think they could have a top 10 offensive production from their outfield, and that would be carried by Walker and Nootbaar. I think whatever you get from Edman is more of a bonus than anything. I do think you could have somebody win a Gold Glove. I think you could see Nootbaar potentially get a Gold Glove in left. Tommy Edman potentially get a Gold Glove in center field. And I think Walker, though I don't think he can get a Gold Glove, my expectation is he's going to be better than average this year in right field. So I think you're looking at an outfield group that should be top 10 in baseball, because you're going to have both Nootbaar and Walker should get 20-plus home runs this year. Nootbaar's going to drive the on-base with walks, and hopefully Walker drives the on-base with his hits, and his average should be in the 270 to 290 range, I believe. I think you're looking at a potential top 10 outfield for the Cardinals, and I don't think you've been able to say that for a really long time. Even going into last year, I didn't think they had a top 10 outfield production. But granted, I was a little lower on Lars Nootbaar last year than I am here today.
So the top 5 last year in terms of outfield production by OPS, not getting fancy, just on base plus slugging. Very simple. Most fans at least acknowledge that this is a good way to look at production from your outfielders. Number 1, no surprise, the Atlanta Braves. Number 2, Chicago Cubs. Number 3, Houston. Number 4, LA Dodgers. Number 5, the Boston Red Sox. On that list, the Cardinals were all the way down at 19th last year. They had a 730 OPS among their outfield. They would only have to be 30 points better this year to be top 10. That was San Diego at number 10 on the list of best outfield production by OPS last year. they would have to have a 780 OPS by their outfield as in its entirety to be top 5, according to last year's metrics, at least. That's where the Boston Red Sox were. Do you guys think they could fit somewhere in there? Like a 760 to a 780 OPS among their outfielders going into 2024?
Yeah, I think so. I think Tommy Edman's going to be the one that I'm just hoping can continue to carry the load. You hope he doesn't bring down that OPS because of his heavy splits from one side to the other. But yeah, I think that's definitely doable when you look at what the projections are with Walker and
Last
Nootbaar.
year, you had Newt at 780. You had Walker at 780 as well. And Brendan Donovan's going to take a decent number of at-bats, I would assume, out there as well. He was at right around an 800 OPS. Among those three, you're right at roughly an 800 OPS, which puts you at top 5. And then it just becomes a question of, like, what do you get out of Tommy Edman? How far does he drag you among that group? When Tommy Edman was playing in the outfield last year, he was at a 550 OPS.
Yeah, I think you can get there because I think Walker and Nootbaar expectation is they have 800 OPSs this year, and higher. I think it can be even more higher than that for Jordan Walker. And then, like you said, it's just what is Tommy Edman? And, you know, I'll throw this in there, too. I don't think they would go about it this way, but, like, say Edman does have to end up moving to the infield. I mean, it depends on what Carlson does, too. I mean, I think Carlson, if he ends up developing on the against right-handed pitching like the Cardinals believe he can, he probably does have a higher offensive ceiling than what Tommy Edman does. I just don't know if he'll get there from the left side of the plate. Against lefties, he's fantastic, but so is Tommy Edman.
Yeah, and I would say the defense is better by Tommy Edman being in the outfield as well. And I think Tommy Edman was good at shortstop. And that's as far as I would be willing to go. I think there's a chance that Mason Wynn is elite defensively at shortstop. And I think there's a chance that Tommy Edman's elite in center field. Now, you're always going to want more out of his arm. I totally understand that. I'm in agreement with you completely on that, T-Bone. I just think that's like, of the skills that I'm looking for from my center fielder, probably last on the defensive skills that I would be hoping to obtain. You'd like to have it. Don't get me wrong. It's a box that you do not have checked with Tommy Edman out there, but it is the last thing that I would be looking for. If he's able to just have the exact same appearance out there this upcoming season as he did a year ago, I think you're going to be pretty happy with it. I think they've got a chance to be a top 7-ish outfield when it comes to offensive production going into 2024, and it's why I'm so optimistic about the offense. As frustrating as last year was, man, I continue to look at the Cardinals, the lineup that they could put out there every day. I heard the Fast Lane, T-Bone, we were talking about this off air. I heard the Fast Lane talking about the Cardinals the other day and saying how they don't have an offensive identity, and I think there's some truth to that, and like they're not any one thing, and I actually think that's a positive. I view the Cardinals in the way that they have on-base guys with Donovan and Nootbaar from the left side, and power hitters that they've got with Nolan Gorman specifically as like a pure power hitter. And then they've got the full all-around guys with Walker and Contreras and Arenado and Goldie. Like, you have a little bit of everything. You got some speed now at the bottom of your lineup with Mason Wynn and Tommy Edman. The diversity that you can have in your lineup is, I think, something that's gone a little under the radar with the Cardinals, and I think it's something that not enough teams put value in, and they pigeonhole themselves into, okay, we are this, and if this doesn't work, like if our power doesn't produce in the postseason, we're screwed. We have no other ways that we can go about scoring runs. You got to have a little bit of everything. You got to be able to get on base. You got to be able to steal some bases. You've got to be able to hit for power. If you can't pull from all of those different levers over the course of the regular season, it doesn't matter because you're not going to get to the postseason. And then if you get to the playoffs and you don't have all of those different pieces to it, you're done. You become the New York Yankees, who are just pure right-handed power all the time.
The question that I always have is, will they do it? Like, it's one thing to have the guys that can do it. Like, I look at Wynn and Nootbaar and Walker and say, like, these guys could steal bases, but they don't for some reason. Can they be a move the guy to base? Can they be a contact and a running team? Sure. But they don't. They always seem to fall back into, well, when they get a guy to second base, they're not driving him in. They're going to hit a home run, and if they don't, they're getting the double play.
And I think that's totally fair because I feel like the last, honestly, since I joined the show, which was, I think, 2021, I feel like every year since then, we've been going, man, if you look at this lineup, they have like 6 guys that could get to like 20-plus home runs, and then they miss that mark. And then if you want to throw in the clutch hitting as well with runners at scoring position, last year was a really bad year, especially with the bases loaded. Like, it always does feel like, I think they are well balanced. Like, on paper, I think they lean more towards being a power hitting team. Slug, baby, slug. They got a nice balance of on base. They've got a nice balance of guys that can steal bases. Problem is something does always seem to go awry, if you want to call it that way. And then I feel like the offense never reaches its ceiling.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that, and it becomes a question, I think, of the outfield. The outfield is what will determine the outcome. We talked earlier today about the number 2 starter and what you need out of that guy and how that's going to determine the outcome of the Cardinals season pitching-wise. I think the same is true for the outfield with the offense. Like your outfield will determine the ceiling for what you can do offensively this year, assuming everybody else has a relatively normal season. Coming up next, we'll hit the rewind here on 101 ESPN. He's Alex, that's T-Bone, I'm BK. It's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Hey, if you missed anything from today's show, be sure to check it out on the podcast page, 101ESPN.com, and the free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. It's all presented by
Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers.
Alex, let's finish things out where we started today, which is a little bit of hopium on the St. Louis Blues because, man, I don't know how they keep getting away with this. I don't think they have played particularly well in either of the last two games, and yet they came away against Calgary in Vancouver, both games on the road. Typically, this is the West Coast trip that we talk about that is the West Coast trip from hell. Blues go out there to see their point streak go to die, and instead they started a point streak by going out to the West Coast. They beat Calgary. They beat Vancouver despite getting completely outshot, out-hit, bunch of turnovers. Didn't matter. Go to overtime, find a way to win. And at this point, you're 4 games above 500 for the first time in 2 years. You are on a 5 games above 500 stretch right now with Bannister as the head coach. I'm setting all things aside. I don't think this is a great hockey team. I think they are slightly below average. I also think the Western Conference is slightly below league average or below average. And so I think this team can make the playoffs, man. I don't know that they will, but I think they absolutely can, but it will require them to continue getting the kinds of production they've had from Shin, Neighbours, and Saad. Those guys have 7 goals in their last 3 games. The secondary scoring is finally starting to show up, and if that continues, that is their formula.
Yeah, I think it's a nice little mix of sugar and spice and secondary scoring with some really good goaltending and then also everything nice. That's what's working for this team right now. I also think that at least in this 3-game point streak, they fell back into that narrative of teams looking at it saying easy win for us. Like last night was the prototypical trap game for the Vancouver Canucks because they were fat and happy waiting for the Blues to come in after a 2-0 shutout victory against the Blackhawks, and the Blues at least capitalized on their opportunities. But when you've got secondary scoring, when you got a goaltending tandem that can steal you hockey games on a nightly basis, you can steal points. And you don't have to be the prettiest team right now because, again, they are in the middle of a retool. All you need to do is start figuring out what formula it takes to win hockey games, and you build from there because you hope that secondary scoring is coming through your minor league system. You know you've got the goaltending. You're stuck right now with some of the contracts, but they're playing at least better than what they were last year. If anything, you just want to make the playoffs this year, and that's what the Blues are trying to accomplish. And if they put a point streak together, you're within striking distance.
If this is what the second line can do for a decent stretch, the Blues can go on that 6-game win streak that we've been saying. They need 5-game win streak. Yeah. They got to go on a win streak at some point if they're going to make the playoffs. I don't know when it's going to happen, if it's going to happen, but if it is going to happen, the secondary scoring's going to be a big reason why they're able to accomplish that.
Blues off tonight, back in action tomorrow in Seattle against the Kraken. Alex will have your pregame coverage tomorrow night, starting at 8 o'clock right here on your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN. We will talk to you guys tomorrow live from the Centene Community Ice Center, but coming up next, it is the Fast Lane here on 101 ESPN.